Getting shorter, it just makes me feel so
Mhm.
happy.
Oh
I
God, you know that first breath of autumn when
Yeah.
it just
Oh,
you can just feel it and smell it and taste it on the air, and it's like, oh,
yeah.
summer's dying, summer's
It's
dying. Good,
it's
good.
finally effing off.
Yeah.
I've been in washing limbo because it's way too hot to put the radiators on to dry
Uh-huh.
washing inside. But it's been really hot here, but overcast, and we
Right.
keep getting told that it might rain, so I don't want to washing on and then not
Yeah.
be able to put it out. So I just have 7 piles of washing now.
It's the classic catch-22, isn't it? And it's like this. I mean, this summer's been beastly, hasn't it? I mean, like obviously it's global warming, it's climate change. Yeah, this
Yeah.
I have. There have been days. There have been certain days. Yesterday was one when I've never known heat like that in the UK.
No, it's we're not people are making fun of us, but we're not equipped for it. We don't have air conditioning inside.
No, all of our infrastructure is it's built to maintain the heat. It's built to
Yeah.
retain the heat because classically, this is kind of a cold, rainy country. It's the way
Yeah.
it's been for a very, very, very long time. So all of our buildings are designed to retain heat. Unfortunately, now that things are changing, that's not the best situation.
No, I settled down on I worked really late last night, and
Uh-huh.
downstairs in my house, I don't have many soft furnishings, and I've
Right.
had the curtains closed for days so that like the sun isn't getting in, and it's been blissfully cool. But
Oh,
I powered everything down, and I came up the stairs to go to bed, and like I could
yeah.
feel the heat of the second floor, and I was like, oh fuck that! And I just turned around
That's
and went back
yes.
down.
Yeah. I mean, I live in a it's like a little maisonette thing, you know. And the downstairs is great. The downstairs is really lovely because it's always cool down here, usually. But
Yeah.
the way it channels the heat up is incredible. So I'm kind of consigned to the bottom floor at the moment, unless I
Yeah.
want to grab something very quickly from upstairs, you know. That
Yeah, just do it.
it's
Just do a
ground
dash.
floor all the way, I'm afraid. Yeah. It makes me, I mean, like this heat, it makes me feel dumb. It makes me feel really
Yeah.
slow and vapid, and I can't articulate myself correctly, which I hate. You know,
Yeah.
can't
I
think. I can't think properly, and I don't like that at all.
my my husband mostly works from home, and his work
Mm.
setup is in the attic is converted, and it's like a decent
Right.
size. So he's got like his workstation set up there, and then
Uh-huh.
also like we moved all of his gaming stuff up there
Oh wow.
and instruments. So like all of his hobbies are up there. So basically, if he's not in the attic, he doesn't have access to any of his cool stuff. And he's just been braving it up there, and I don't know how he's doing it. The our one
Oh my God! Especially if the electronics are on as well.
Yeah, and our
Oh.
one cat is really obsessed with him, and he's always in the attic with him, and he doesn't come down unless Nick comes down, and he's been downstairs for a while, and then Thor will come down looking for him, like, "Hey, it
Braves
was
it,
do you
yeah.
know 10 minutes has passed and you have not returned? What's going on?" But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, he's up there in his fluffy little fur coat, just lolling around. I was like, you don't
Yes.
have to suffer it, Thor. You can.
Yeah, right. Please seek out the cool, you know? Seek
I've
out
been
the cool
putting
places.
bowls of water up there for him constantly,
No.
make sure he's hydrated. Nick, I mean, not the cat,
Well, I was
you
going to
know.
say, yeah, just to clearly make that distinction, you know? Um, but yeah, I mean, I've been working on a poem for years and years. I started it like decades ago. And it is called The Death of Day. And it is literally about wanting to murder the sun.
Just so unnecessary, just up in the
Right.
sky, all fiery and angry, like,
Well, in the poem, I compare it to like a death spot. It's like a
yeah,
giant, the eye of a giant tyrant that's glaring down on everyone and judging everyone.
yeah.
Um,
I I stepped out of the house at like 5 p.m. today, and it was
uh,
hotter than it was 3 hours earlier. And
yes,
like I just said, "Oh, for God's sake." That's like usually what comes out of my mouth if I go outside
yes,
when it's hot.
yeah,
Oh,
yes. This is starting out to be a very British podcast. We're moaning about the weather. This is like people are good. This is going to get real good thumbs up. This is going to get good traction on the interwebs. This is. That's what it should be. We should just cancel the other things and just talk about,
Yeah.
just be very British and moan about the weather, you know?
So, I think we're justified though, because we're not the
I
kind of
think
people that
so.
complain that we want the summer and then complain when it
No,
gets here. We're happy to be in the dark always.
absolutely,
So,
yes. I mean, I say it almost every summer, usually on the social medias. But the White Witch in Narnia, the 100 Years of Winter that she casts over Narnia. I want that
oh,
spell.
blissful.
What
Yeah.
what did she do? I want to know what the incantation is and what I need to get it done. Yeah,
I would just like it if it just stayed dark.
yeah,
Just that would be
yeah.
that would be great. I like the dark hours.
Me too.
There
Me
aren't enough of
too.
them, if you ask me.
I guess the other thing I like about when the autumn rolls in and you get those shorter days and the longer periods of darkness. I
Yeah.
much prefer that. And this is, it's almost cliche because we're both sort of like involved in horror to varying degrees, and it's almost like it's a cliche thing for horror people to say, isn't it? Oh, we prefer the dark, we prefer the
Yeah.
cold, but it's absolutely true. It's been true
I
since I was
just
a kid.
Yeah, I find the nighttime peaceful. That's when everyone is like powered down for the day, and it's like peaceful, and that's when you have your free time. And I associate that with darkness. And
Mhm.
in the summer, it comes in so late that you have to waste all the good dark hours asleep.
Yeah,
You don't
yeah,
get to enjoy any of them.
absolutely. I just think, I do think there are people who would just sort of like have different circadian rhythms. So some people are just
Mhm,
naturally attuned to the colder, darker months. The
mhm.
autumn and the winter. I mean, I was born in 1984, and apparently, according to my parents, it was like February 1984, like one of the worst winters this country has ever known. It was like straight snow for weeks on end.
That sounds
And
lovely.
it sounds great, doesn't it? It sounds absolutely brilliant. And that my mum has always said that's why you like the winter and the dark so much, because it was like she was saying it was like Reykjavik, that period. There was just like it was so bad. Apparently the snow had brought down telegraph poles, and everything was closed. There were like blackouts and all sorts of stuff going on. It was absolute chaos. Sounds brilliant. Sounds
Yeah. Well,
absolutely amazing.
well, maybe that's where it is, George, because we're winter babies. Because I'm an end of December baby.
Yes,
Um,
so both
and I
winter.
love it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've gotten better. I've gotten more tolerant as I've gotten older, but I still don't like it.
I've learned I like the sun if it's
uh,
on holiday.
yeah.
Like if you go on holiday intentionally somewhere nice,
Uh,
because hotter countries are equipped with air conditioning. And
yes.
so when you go inside, like if you don't want to feel hot anymore, you can just go inside.
Yeah, crank
Whereas
up the air
here,
conditioning, get in the pool or whatever, yeah. Here you just sit and
yeah,
swelter, don't you? You just sit and swelter. And everything
yeah,
absorbs it. Everything absorbs it and then radiates it, like the roads, the walls, everything just
yeah.
retains heat. This goddamn sort of Victorian architecture we've got. It's yeah,
My
it's
my car is black as well. So
that's
you get in a hot car. It's
brilliant.
If anyone ever
Oh,
hears me getting it, my neighbors probably think I'm a lunatic because I get into the car and I'm like, oh, fucking, like,
just start cursing. Yeah,
sitting there with the door wide open for as
yeah,
long as possible while I wait for the air conditioning to work.
yeah. Whilst
Like,
cursing, obviously.
yeah, yep. Everyone
Brilliant.
else is like, oh, what a nice day.
No, no. I always like, I must have a certain like Ebenezer Scrooge, like inverse Ebenezer Scrooge reputation around my area, because whenever it's like this and people, oh, it's a lovely, no, it's not. It's horrible. Too hot and sweaty and vile, and I don't like it. Humbug, you
Well,
know?
we all have different perspectives, and what I've
Yes.
learned is that sun worshipping British people have the wrong perspective.
Yes. Yes. They are not. I find that generally they are not of my tribe, you know?
Yeah, we have a type.
I do have an intimation that I mean, I want it because it's the internet and everything's so extreme. I just want to point out that I'm joking, I'm
Yeah,
exaggerating.
yeah, same,
But
yeah.
there's a tendency for sun worshipping people to be very loud and to be quite, you know, to be a bit brash and sort of like just shut up and go away, you know?
Yeah, I heard that they all drink cider.
Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. It's like just no, no. They're social people, aren't they? And it's like,
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah,
uh,
yeah, the social butterflies, but that is very alien to me.
you engage in society. You haven't made a rut for yourself like all anyone like post boomer generation should have done. You know, made a little warren for yourself and retreated into it, away from the horrors of culture and society. That's where we should be.
Do you know what I was talking to another author the other day, I did an author interview, and we were talking about how a lot of people in the writing community,
Mhm.
especially the horror indie spaces,
Oh yes.
we're all a bit like in person, quite we've got like social awkwardness and stuff. We get stressed, but we
Mhm.
all kind of recognize that in each other, so it's not
Yes.
actually a problem when we're all together.
Yes,
And
I have noticed. There's like I've gotten on. I've really gotten on well with all of like the people I've met face to face from the
yeah,
horror community. It's been really nice. So yes, I think there's some truth to that. I mean, you know, we are at heart writers, aren't we? So we're people who kind of want to be. You know, we do tend to spend a lot of time in isolation talking to ourselves. You know?
yeah. And I think I think I'm most comfortable in groups of horror fans and writers because
Mm,
they're the only social groups I don't actually feel weird in.
yeah,
Like I
yeah. I mean,
feel, yeah.
yes, I know exactly what you mean. We're all common weirdos in our own peculiar ways, aren't we? And we kind of acknowledge and celebrate that, which is nice. It's a bit like I feel. I mean, there's a lot of overlap here. I feel the same way in queer communities. You know,
Yeah,
there's a lot of
yeah,
that. I mean, you know, as I said, there's a huge overlap there. I mean, like as you know, the queer community in horror and it's just exploding, it's gigantic at the moment. It's really really cool.
yeah.
Some
Oh, I'm
amazing
enjoying it.
stuff. Yeah, I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
don't know
there's
where to. I mean, there's so much now.
hmm I've
So
I've
much.
noticed as well that people are having um more reasonable conversations about stuff like this recently as well.
Yes.
I saw somebody in one of it was probably books of horror on Facebook.
Mhm.
That's usually where I am. And it might have been me or someone else even asked for recommendations for horror written by gay authors.
Right.
And somebody commented, "Oh, I'm not like arguing or anything. There's a genuine question.
Mhm.
Is there a difference? Like, does it actually matter?" And
Oh
so,
yeah. Wow. Yeah.
uh,
That's a good
what was
question.
really yeah, and what was really nice is that I opened the comments up to write an answer, and I was
Yes.
expecting to see people going off, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
well, accusing them of being homophobic or something. And people were
Yeah.
just really nicely
No, it's
explaining that,
if you aren't aware, that's actually a really decent question. And
yeah,
yeah, the answer is yes. There often is a difference.
yeah, there were some people saying like sometimes it's not really about there being a difference in the work, it's just
Hmm.
about recognizing that gay authors are still underrepresented, and so making a conscious
Yes.
effort to seek them
Yeah.
out. And then there were people like me in there that were saying like I actually have found a difference in the type of
Yeah.
horror often because the lived experience of the author is very different.
Yeah.
So it's a different perspective on people and
Yeah.
how and the types of stories that they're telling, and that you don't get
I
necessarily with
find,
straight authors.
yeah, I find that generally queer writers in general there's less sort of moral absolutism. So you
Yeah,
often don't get a dynamic of villain and protagonist. There's a lot of overlap between them and a lot of ambiguity, and often that dynamic just doesn't exist within queer horror fiction. You know, there's a lot more
I
empathy and sympathy with the monstrous and with the outcast, with the exile. It's not universally true. I mean, you get straight authors who do that as well, but it's more true of queer horror writers, I find.
I agree. And there's a story that's coming to mind by a trans author called Mocha Pennington.
Hmm.
And it was the first short horror story I read that ever made me cry
Oh,
because it was the most relatable story for me as a woman that I've ever
uh-huh.
read. And I'm sure that there'd be some cis women that be find that an odd thing to say for a
Hmm.
piece of horror written by a trans woman, but like women are women.
Yes,
And I think
absolutely.
that she so well articulated the
Hmm.
feeling of like not feeling like she fit the mold well enough, the
Yeah.
character. And it really like I was like, I can't claim to say, oh well, this is just like my experience, because obviously it isn't. I've had
Mm.
a easier time sort of like fitting in that regard,
Yeah.
just being cis. But the way that she described all of the emotions and like the stuff, the turmoil you go through because of
Hmm.
society, I was like, this is the best put I have ever seen it.
Yeah.
Um, so I do think it's like, I think it's really useful for people who aren't of that community to read this stuff, because you realize, like, I do think it helps with empathy quite a lot, because you realize that we're
Absolutely.
all a lot more similar than we are different.
Yeah, and I find that it expands the remit of the genre as well. I mean,
Yeah,
it's a really strange thing, isn't it? I mean, if you look back at the history of horror as a genre, then there have always been these voices. I mean, like women in horror are huge. I mean, like women have redefined the genre so many times in its history. I mean, yeah, the classics, Mary Shelley, for God's sake. I mean, Mary Shelley, not only a woman but queer as well. You know, it's
yeah, and
it's so many
invented
demographics.
sci-fi.
Basically invented sci-fi and reinvented horror fiction with Frankenstein, the new Prometheus,
Yeah,
you know? It is an
yeah.
urtext. It's I mean it really I mean you don't have to have necessarily have read it specifically, but you do need to understand it to understand what horror is or what literature is in this country because it's an urtext, right? It's mythic, but
Yeah, it's
tends to get
yeah.
like sort of relegated alongside her, like, you know, ostensibly straight, by the way, male compatriots. I say ostensibly because you look at like Bram Stoker, and he had a massive crush on a male figure, and his letters to this guy are actually quite. They're quite overt, you know. So it's like, yeah, not quite straight, but his fiction is very, very, very straight indeed, you know.
I didn't
Um,
know that.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I can't remember the guy's name, but if you can dig up the letters, they are. It's like, wow, you had a crush on this guy, didn't you? Identified as straight. Obviously, he was very. I mean, Bram Stoker was really conservative and quite unpleasant, actually, but had this massive crush on
Nice.
this guy. You know, very peculiar, very, very peculiar. Um, but yeah, I think of Shirley Jackson.
Oh,
I
Shirley.
mean, God Almighty. Seismic horror. I mean, just there is nothing like Shirley, just particularly her haunted house stuff. You know, or
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I say haunted house, but it's never that simple, is it? With Shirley
No,
Jackson.
she's just very good at like gothic horror, but
Yeah,
like however she wants to use that. Like, yeah. Oh gosh,
so
Susan Hill has
beautifully.
scared me also.
Yes, yes. But there is still the thing in horror, isn't it? Despite all these new voices, there is still this thing of like the god. You know, there is it is the story of certain cisgender white men, you know, who predominate. That is
Yeah,
changing. That is changing, and for the better, and to the benefit, by the way, of cisgender straight white authors. You know, because what's happening with the influx of all these different voices is the genre is expanding. Its remit is
yeah,
expanding enormously. I mean, I keep saying it, but since like I started to get actively involved in the like small press and independent horror community, I've come across stuff I've never seen before, like never seen before.
yeah.
The stuff like "We Are Here to Hurt One Another" by Paula Dash. You know, I
Oh my
read
God,
that,
that book.
and I
Oh
was
my
like,
God.
Jesus, right? This is like this is like the most sincere legacy of Barker I've ever seen, but it's its own thing as well. It's doing
Barker.
something new, you know?
Yeah. Oh God. I'm really happy to see, because I do think it's the indie horror space that has really expanded
Oh, it's
like
so true.
support more than, and I think that mainstream publishing is still
Oh,
behind in
it's
catching up
oh,
on that.
I'll be honest, I think mainstream publishing, certainly in genre fiction, is dead on its ass. It's dead
Yeah,
on
but
its
I
ass.
will.
You go into like most like mainstream bookstores and you will see the same names again and again and again. And the books that have been published since the 1980s, 1970s. And don't get me wrong, there's a reason why these books have been published since the 1980s and the 1970s. They're very good. They're very good writers. They're very good books. It's not a stab against them. It's against the industry, which is so
Yeah,
conservative. It's so goddamn conservative. And he's so
something.
afraid. It's so afraid of
Yeah,
letting new voices, and it's bizarre because all of
this
the
is
good stuff is happening there. You know?
this is why I have been pleasantly delighted to see Titan championing Eric LaRocca so much.
Yes.
Um, because, but I will say, Eric LaRocca did build a fan base by himself
Yeah.
first.
Absolutely. Oh
And
God, yeah. I mean, Eric is the story of somebody who they're not only a great writer and he is, but a great marketer as well. Just knows what to do.
also, oh, have you ever spoken to him, George?
No, not directly. I don't think
Oh
so.
my God. Oh, he is all as well as being ridiculously talented, just
Hmm.
across the board and a fantastic writer and everything. He is the sweetest person in the entire
Oh.
world. He's so like honestly, he is so delightful to talk to that
Mhm.
I interviewed him and for the whole hour I was like, I want to hug him.
Oh, that's
He's
brilliant. I mean,
he's
again,
lovely. Yeah,
it's kind of my experience, if I'm perfectly honest, of these spaces, and I've met so many people through it. But I know, obviously, it's the kind of space where you're always going to get bad actors. There's always going to be some people who are
yeah,
problematic and whatnot. It's always going to happen. But my experience is generally very, 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 very positive indeed. Um,
yeah. That's why I'm so happy to see a publisher like Titan
yeah,
printing Eric LaRocca because it's not even just that it's horror fiction and that he's a queer writer. It's that the
right.
stuff he writes is so far outside what you would normally find in traditional publishing.
Yeah, totally
Um,
right.
and then when you talk to him, you can't help but feel like he's so deserving of the
Yeah,
success
yeah, it's
as a
lovely to
human
see.
being as well. Yeah, and it's funny because I've been friends with him on Facebook for years and years, and I just
Mhm.
watched him like when you can just see somebody sort of climbing the mountain.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I could see it. I could see him like getting more and more popular, and I love. Oh, I just love to see that. It's the
It
best,
is
isn't it?
lovely,
Like,
isn't it? It is absolutely the best. And it seems to have happened so, I mean, it's not effortless, but he makes it look effortless, you know, he makes it look really, it's just the way he is. He's so good at this. You know, this is his
yeah,
milieu. This is what he does. And that's
I'm
very
just.
impressive.
I'm just waiting for some New York Times piece to come out saying that he's
Mm.
an overnight success,
Yeah,
because they always say that when
they
people have spent a
always say
decade
that.
grafting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely. It's one of them, isn't it? It's one of them. It's one of those strange things where it'll either happen or it won't, you know? And it is often this thing where you get your work in front of the right people,
yeah,
you know? And
yeah,
it's so strange because like when you know your work it's a long shot because it's so weird or so unusual, even within the genre.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
that you know it could have appeal, and that a group of people out there who will go nuts for it. But
yeah,
you've got to get
yeah,
those people. You've got to get those people to look at it.
yeah.
It's an interesting phenomena. I mean, I remember when I got my Born in Blood collections published through Ghoulish book. It was a perpetual motion machine back then. Both
Hmm.
I and Max, who published it, knew that it was going to be this thing where there's people who are going to absolutely go nuts, and there are people who are going to absolutely hate it, you know? And that's exactly the
Hmm.
reaction we got. That was exactly the reaction we got. The people who love it absolutely love it. The people who hate it. And that's kind of like, yeah, it's good. That's
Yeah,
not a bad thing, you know?
yeah. That's I look forward to negative criticism of the stuff I put out because I always think that that is a telltale sign that your work is reaching like I say not that your audience isn't authentic in the first place, but you're reaching an audience of people that don't know you now, which means your work is getting out there.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely. And
so,
I like it when I certainly for the Born in Blood collections, I liked the negative press better than the positive. I did, because the things that the negative reviews were saying was like, yes, that's what I wrote it for. Yeah,
yeah,
that's it. That's exactly it. Yes. Um, so I was like, oh,
I
that it sort of reinforced me, you know.
yeah, oh God, I prefer to see positive. I prefer to know
Hmm.
that people enjoyed my stuff.
Yeah,
However,
it's
I
good,
do
you know.
I do find negative reviews of things really funny sometimes. Not necessarily just like of my stuff, but like sometimes you see these really comical negative reviews,
Hmm.
and I am eagerly awaiting the day that something I write pisses someone off so much that they take
Yeah.
to the internet to write an essay about it.
Now
Because
that
that
I
can only
love.
ever help anyway.
Yeah, that I
That will
love.
only help sales.
I do. I haven't done it for a long time actually, but I was very active on my blog over at Strange Playgrounds for a period, and I wrote there's loads of free stories over on the Strange Playgrounds blog. I used to do it like all the time. Um,
Mhm.
and somebody made a point, and I remember stepping back and thinking, that's weird, that's really weird. One of the stories, which involved a trans man, pissed someone off so much that they actively made an account to comment on it. And I was like, I don't think I've ever done that in my life. I don't think I've ever seen anything on the internet that's aroused such ire that I've been asked to sit and create an
Yeah,
account specifically to comment on it. And
no, there's
I'm thinking to myself, wow, wow, that's almost a kind of weird endorsement.
with it, yeah, there's different types of negative criticism, aren't there?
Yes.
There's like people who are, for example, perhaps a bigot, and they
Hmm.
don't want to see a gay person or a trans person or something, or a woman doing anything well in a book.
Oh yeah.
But then there's like negative criticism that comes from a place of like people that really care about storytelling, and your
Yeah.
book has frustrated them,
Yeah.
and
Which
so
is
they've
that
like
totally fine. I've got, that's like a technical and taste thing, right?
And I would
So
take it as a compliment if someone
yeah.
spent that much effort dissecting something that I wrote,
Yeah,
because I
absolutely.
would, yeah. I'm always grateful for anybody that says anything publicly about any of
Yeah.
my
Well,
stuff,
anyone who takes the
because
time, anyone who
yeah,
takes the time, I'm so like, and it is a thing in writing. You do find the occasional writer who's not very nice to their audience, who seems to think that they're owed an audience or something. And it's like,
hmm
no, no, no. If someone takes the time, because
hmm
I've always felt it like you are actively taking up real estate in someone's head. You know,
yeah,
there's a slightly aggressive quality to it in many respects. You are sort of bludgeoning your way inside someone's mind and imagination, and then you're setting up real estate, and you're sort of squatting there, and you're reshaping it to a certain degree. You're actively trying to change their perceptions in a very particular way, or the shape of their imagination. So
hmm
if they take the time, if they take the time to actually react or respond to your work, then fine. That's really good. I mean, nobody's owed it. Nobody's owed
no.
it.
I always think that that's a sign that that's a like-minded person for me, because I only tend to go on rants about stuff that I
Hmm.
really care about. So
Yes.
I never make worst books of the year lists or
Oh,
anything on my YouTube channel. I just don't see the need, but I have had an almost hour-long, relatively unhinged rant about Alien Covenant.
well,
And
that's fair.
yes, and that's because I am so attached to Alien and Aliens, and I was so disappointed that we finally get, Ridley Scott. And I'm like, oh yay! And then I watched it and I was like, oh no. And
Yeah.
but sometimes when I rant about things and I hate things, I think
Uh,
about them for so long that I end up circling around and changing my mind. and
Yes, I
finding
know.
it hasn't happened with Covenant. It's not going to, but other
No, I
stuff.
don't know. To be 100% fair, I don't normally like do the hate watching thing, but Prometheus and Covenant are definitely films that I yeah, they do that to me. Um, I've softened. I remember when I watched Prometheus for the first time, it was a case of it was profound hatred for it. It really was quite. It's
Yeah.
unusual for me to respond that strongly in the negative to any piece of media. But I felt with Prometheus that it was almost like trying to con me. You know,
Hmm.
it was that whole thing of it wanted so desperately for us to believe that it was profound and clever and insightful and brilliant, and it's not. It's
No,
not willing to
it's
do the work. You know.
yeah, it's disappointing. Did you watch You?
Oh no, I haven't seen it yet.
See, that's the one that everyone is mad about because of they just aired the final season, and I won't go into spoiler territory, so nobody needs to worry if you're still watching it. But I watched the last season and I was like,
uh,
eh. But I have thought about it quite a bit, and
yeah,
I've actually come round on actually they did quite a lot of stuff right.
yeah,
Um, and the main criticism that everyone seems to have is that they're sort of like bashing us around the head with this idea that Joe is the bad guy. And I was like, well,
right,
yes,
right.
that's established in episode 1 that he is the bad guy. And they were like, oh, it's like they just didn't trust the audience to come to that conclusion on their own. And I'm like, look, the audience didn't come to that conclusion on their own. They had
Uh,
4 seasons of everybody
right, right.
absolutely loving Joe and being like, oh, I hope he gets the ending he deserves. And oh, I hope he finds true love. And I'm like, this is a show about a misogynistic serial killer.
Right, yeah. It's not
What?
someone you should be
And
necessarily like championing here.
no, but because the actor that plays him is pleasant looking and he's very sweet.
Ah,
And
could get away with
because
anything then, right?
I always say it, if you are a man and you're hot and funny, you will be
Hmm.
forgiven for anything by a TV audience.
Totally
Anything.
true. Totally
I
true.
thought I thought it with Negan from The Walking Dead. I
Yeah.
um yeah, like obviously should have really been a hated character, but
Uh-huh.
Jeffrey Dean Morgan is
But
just so
yeah,
sexy.
yeah.
And the character's funny and people wanted to like him. And I saw people tying themselves in knots trying to be, oh well actually if we'd started the show from Negan's perspective, then this is what it would have looked like.
Yeah,
I'm
I
like,
know.
yeah, but
It
we
is a
didn't.
phenomena. It is a phenomena, isn't it? I mean, I remember when I first experienced that, and it was a book by Billy Martin, writing as Poppy Z. Bright,
Yeah.
back in the 1990s. It was the book Exquisite Corpse,
Yes.
and
Go on.
which is a book about gay serial killers.
Yeah.
One based on Dennis Nilsson and one based on Jeffrey Dahmer, and it's like a
Hmm.
it's like a weird twisted love affair. It's about how they end up through like almost like a weird dark comedy of errors coming together and
Yeah.
realizing who they
Yes.
are,
Yeah.
and it's really it's really disturbing and unpleasant, but it's also really goddamn hot, like
Yeah. I.
really hot. And it's like I remember reading it, and like Andrew Compton, the character that's based on Dennis Nilsson, I was like,
Mhm.
I really like him. But I
It's
was
a
like,
yeah.
I was actually shocked. I remember putting the book down and thinking that ain't right. That's aroused something in you that is actually quite troubling. You know,
Well,
the,
I think that's just the mark of a writer that writes layered characters well, because
yes,
nobody is all. I mean, there are some people that their actions are objectively evil.
yes. And Andrew
There are,
Compton is
but that
objectively evil. He's
yes.
so bad. I mean, he is like he's. I mean, he is the worst of the worst of the worst. He's a cannibal. He's a serial killer. He's awful. He's
Mhm.
awful. He's a sadist, you know. Um,
Yeah,
and I was
that's it.
shocked. I was shocked
It's
that I was like, I find him really hot. It's the same thing with the Hannibal series.
Yeah, it's a weird one. That well, Joe and you, because we're in his inner monologue all the time, so
Mhm.
like it's not just from his perspective, but we're hearing his thoughts.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and he quite often like he comes across like characters that we as an audience would find insufferable, and he's in
Uh,
his head like, oh, this bitch, and so you like agree with him, and he's
right.
making these like funny, witty comments about them in his head, and then the way he openly responds to them is even funnier because of it, because you know what he actually thought. And
Yeah.
I was like, no, this is a great way to present this show because I read the book and
Mm.
you cannot be on his side in the book because
Right,
he's
right.
disgust. You don't. He's a different character. Like
Yeah.
they gave him more redeem. Like no, I don't want to say redeeming, but like they
Mhm.
gave him more likable traits in the show.
I suppose
Um,
in the book you've got a little bit more interiority as well, haven't you? So you see
yeah,
like the internal processes, you get a bit more of an insight into what he's actually like.
yeah, they gave him a bit more of a romantic
Yeah.
softness in the show. Is it in the
Hmm.
book? The language that he uses when he's thinking about the
Hmm.
women is disgusting, and
It's
like, you'd never
gross, yeah.
champion book Joe. Um,
Yeah.
but what the weird thing, I was like, oh, this is interesting because you kind of like you want to be on this guy's side, but you know
Yeah.
something's wrong. And then I was guilty of it for season one myself, and then I snapped out of it by season two because I was watching people that were like all of the online hatred for these
Yeah.
female characters that he didn't like, and they hate them more than they that they like him. And I was like,
That
hang on, that
I mean, that level of misogyny I have really noticed in this kind of show. I mean, and they are shows that I really love for the most part. And it's not the shows themselves that are generally misogynistic. They're kind of commenting upon misogyny, but the
yeah.
fan bases can be enormously misogynistic. So we saw it with Breaking Bad, you know, the
Oh God, everyone
in
hated Skylar so
Skylar, right? And I'm like, her worst sin is just not turning Walt in at the earliest opportunity. That's
yeah,
and even then,
yeah,
she does it for the right reasons. It's a bad decision for the right reasons. She's trying to protect her children. She can't stand the thought of Walter Jr. in particular, like
yeah,
seeing his dad that way. She knows it'll destroy him. So
yeah.
that's
Oh
her
God,
worst sin. But they hate her. I mean, Walter White is an unambiguous evil bastard. Yeah. It's just by his own admission, he's the worst of the worst of the worst,
yeah,
But the hatred for Skylar,
yeah. It's funny.
unreal.
Like you have to laugh. You have to, otherwise it will get you down. But
Yeah.
I do remember I do remember actually not get like people were like, oh, Skylar, and I was like, really?
Yeah.
Because they're like, oh, she's so annoying, and she's mean to Walt, and I was like, oh, he's
Oh,
wrecking their lives.
she's
He's
mean
wrecking.
to Walt. Yeah.
I
She's
was like,
mean to Walt.
I was like, what, the meth
This,
chemist that's putting them all
yeah,
in mortal peril all the time? And
right.
he's
And
like, we've watched a villain origin
yeah,
story. That's what Breaking Bad is. I
exactly right.
was
And it's
like,
implicit
Jesus.
in the show. What gets
Yeah.
me is it's implicit in the show as well. The show is actively making that point. It's not even subtle about it. I mean, it actively says it at the end. You get Walt's confession in the very last, spoilers, by the way, guys, but in the very last episode where he says, it was for me. I did it because I
Mhm.
enjoyed it and I was good at it. That's it.
Yeah, yeah. I always because of my Super Walking Dead fandom, I
Mhm.
always noticed the most hated characters on The Walking Dead were always the women. And I will
Always the women.
say,
Yeah.
sometimes I did think that there was a little bit of a problem in the writing on occasion,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
you couldn't blame people sometimes. But I just I find it funny how those characters are always held to a much higher moral standard than
Yes.
the men
Always
are
the
for some
way.
reason.
Always the
Um,
way, isn't it? Always the way. You've got to be purer than the driven snow, otherwise you are this or you are that, yeah? It's a real
yeah,
problem. It's a real problem for like any marginalized demographic. We
yeah,
may have spoken about this before, but it happens. It's interesting because it is something that happens within like queer writing communities and queer artistic communities. There is this sort of purity policing that happens sometimes
yeah,
from certain quarters where, And James Bennett is great to talk to about this, as is Mark Allen Gunnels. Really good to talk to about this.
Love him. Yeah.
Um, you can't. There is this thing where if you write characters like queer characters and you explore them in all of their complications and ambiguities, if you explore like the negative traits or sides of certain elements of queer culture, then you can be dubbed as being homophobic or internally homophobic. And it's like, no, we are painting an honest picture. We're talking about our honest experience. And if we're not allowed to do that, then that is homophobic. It's robbing us of our humanity. It's making us as though we have to be like these straight, prescribed, pure as the driven snow, good queers who live next door. There's something really sinister about that kind of like internal policing that happens within the community. You also get it where you're not allowed to talk, whether it's certain quarters of the community. They're small, but they're vocal. They're very vocal. Who, if you are, say, exploring issues of homophobia in your work, and you paint homophobic characters honestly, that is, you use the slurs that they use, you use the language that they would use, especially like internally, then you can be dubbed as being homophobic. And it's like, well, you're missing the point. If we're going to explore these phenomena, we have to be able to paint them in an earnest and sincere way. We need them to think and feel and act how they think and feel and act, and these are the words they use. This is their internal, we know enough of it. We've seen enough of it. I think every gay guy has seen more than their fair share of it, quite frankly. We know how they think and how they speak because they're not that shy about it. So, we need to be able to do this in artistic spaces in order to explore it. We need to be able to do it. If you can't do that, all you're giving is this sort of toothless, anodyne, and by the way, very accommodationist and straight prescribed, almost like pantomime of the phenomena.
Yeah, and going back to what you just said about the moral policing, the other element that I've noted, because I've been reading a lot more queer fiction than I realized I was, because when people send me review requests, I just ask for like basic information about the book, but nothing about the author. So I never know, like, unless I actually know the author or something, like I never know anything about the author. And when we hit Pride Month, I was like, oh man, I've done it again, because I always plan to line up my reading accordingly to make sure I'm promoting more queer fiction. And then just time gets away from me. And then the next thing I know, I'm like, oh God, it's the start of the month. And I'm unprepared. But then, and I had like a bunch of book reviews scheduled in advance. And then when I actually looked, I was like, right, find some authors, make sure I'm trying to represent more people. And then as it turned out, most of the books that I'd written reviews for ahead of time were by queer authors, and I just had no idea. I was like, oh, okay. I was like,
brilliant.
I was like,
that worked out nicely.
For my personal reading tastes, I do try. I actually make more of an effort with that now, because I realized that all of my reading was mostly straight white men. Just by default, right?
Because that's what's there, right? That's what's, even now, it's still what's most prevalent.
But something I noticed, so I never look at book reviews until I've read a book, and then I'll write my own review first, and then I go reading other reviews, just so that my review wasn't influenced by another review I read.
Of course,
and I've noticed this moral I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? So if we're talking straight characters, and there is any sexual content at all, unless we're talking extreme horror and we're going into like assault kind of stuff, but like if we're just talking about relationships, right? People don't seem to have an issue with straight people being sexual, right? But if it is gay characters, regardless of context, it is always commented on. I noticed in reviews, it's always commented on, and it's almost like there's still this kind of air of like, oh no, we do your gay books, but make sure your gay characters are all virgins, and they're only having sex when they're in love. And
Yeah.
That was a bit of a weird aside. I was like, that's really odd that the standard for like a
Hmm.
queer person being considered like dirty in their writing is just doing exactly the same thing as straight writers do,
Yes, and
where they
it's sorry, go on.
but and then their relationships are discussed and critically
Yes.
analyzed and held up. And I did think about like the number of times, I don't know the exact number of times, but I know that there are several Stephen King books where his protagonist has cheated on their wife
Yes.
and nobody cares.
Nobody cares. Yeah,
And
it's
that,
absolutely true. I mean, it's a weird thing. It's like it's an odd, almost like liberal centrist way of looking at things. A lot of people who are complaining would not consider themselves to be homophobic, right? Not
yeah,
actively. They believe themselves to be accepting. They believe themselves to be this or that. But what they don't seem to understand is they are prescribing the way we should be or the way we should be represented. And that in and of itself is homophobic. You don't get to tell us. You just don't get to tell
yeah.
us, you know.
Yeah, and
It,
I think it's very weird to be like, ew, gay people
mm,
having sex, but then oh, how romantic. Oh,
yeah,
straight people. Like I'm like, oh, excuse what?
and also, I mean, like the sexual, certainly of gay men, the sexual element. I mean, it's not universal. That it's as wide a spectrum as it is for straight people. But gay men
Hmm.
are very sexual. We are, generally speaking, we are. It's just, and so you are ignoring an entire it's an entire area of our fundamental experience if you don't allow for that or if you don't acknowledge that in some way. And it's dishonest.
Yeah,
That's the other thing. It's insincere. I find it to be insincere.
I
I when
found
I when
myself. Oh, sorry, go on.
No, 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 go ahead.
I was gonna say I recently read Mark oh, I always say there's so many L's. Mark Alan Gunnell's.
Yes,
um I read Triangle
in
recently,
the
his
midst of
recent
it
book.
right now.
Yes. Oh gosh. And
Yeah.
I found myself wondering because this is the stuff I sit around thinking about everybody. I was like, oh, are gay men more sexual, generally speaking, than straight men, or is it just amped up when you
It's
read gay relationships because you've got two men?
that's what it
So
is.
it's
It's
like,
I would posit that gay men are no more sexualized or inherently sexual than any other man, any other men.
yeah,
I think the difference is cultural more than anything, because we are all men and operating in similar spaces. You just get more expression of the sexuality.
yeah. I just think it's
That's
like
just
it's
the way it is.
intensified. Yes, if
Yeah,
there are two men instead of one man, it's gonna be like
yeah.
intensified.
And
um,
it's
yeah,
just more the culture of sex is different as well for gay men. It is the culture of sex is different. It has slightly different dimensions to it because of course it's inherently political for one thing. It's just an
yeah,
inherently political act. So it does
yeah,
have this. It reinforces your identity in a way that's very powerful and profound, and your connection to your community and to other people. So it is a slightly different phenomena, I think. But
it's a
in
weird
terms of
one.
like the
Yeah,
urge, in terms of the fundamental urge, the sexuality, no, I don't think we're any different. I think that the only difference is that we have more opportunity and we just have more of a
yeah.
a sexually open culture. I think that's the truth of the matter. And I think books
I
like Mark Allen Gunnell's one, I think they do sort of express the reality of that in the same way that a lot of Billy Martin, aka Poppy Z. Bright's fiction does, the way a lot of Barker's does when he writes it, my own fiction as well, I mean, this is the weird thing. You know how you were talking earlier about how we're held to a higher standard, or like if it's just like queer romance or anything, it's like zeroed in on and it's emphasized by certain perspectives or critics. I remember when
mhm,
my first short story collection came out. This was donkeys years ago. It was in 2013, published by a company which does still exist, but is very different now, called Dark Moon Books.
mhm.
Um, my short story collection, Strange Playgrounds. Now, Strange Playgrounds is, I would say, it's about the relationships that occur in it it's about 70-30 split, with 70% straight to 30% queer. Yeah. And
hmm
one of the first reviews I got of it zeroed right in on that 30% and mentioned that, oh, there's a lot of queer characters in this, so there's a lot of sex. And I was like, no, there isn't. No, there isn't.
Yeah, a
I'm
lot.
a gay
Yeah.
author, and I've written primarily straight relationships here. There's also, I mean, there is a story in there which is all about sort of female sexuality and its repression in our culture. It's called The State of Lovers. And it's a really, really powerfully sexual story. It's about a woman who she's irritated with her male lovers because they're just not good enough. They're just not good enough. And she has this really strange dream, and it's as though she paints her own perfect lover into reality.
hmm
Um, but it's about problematics of that notion because
Yeah.
what we desire is so fluctuating and so different from day to day. He can't keep up. He can't like it's tearing him apart, catering to her needs. Being the
hmm
perfect lover and boyfriend and whatnot, being the perfect partner is actually becoming tortuous to him. And it's about like how notions of perfection in our partners ultimately destroy us. Um,
Yeah.
but I mean, that is a really highly sexually charged story, and most of it is female. Most of it, and it's all straight. It's all straight. But for some reason that got a free pass, but
It's
the queer stories didn't.
Yeah, it's well, that's when when you said like the criticism was like there was a lot and like a lot to like I think I told you this before. I had a friend who is no
Hmm.
longer a friend
Yeah.
that just noped out of the Haunting of Hill House because he said that there was like gratuitous lesbian sex. And then
There's
when I watched it, because I hadn't watched it yet, I was like, do you mean the one scene
one
where they're
scene.
just finishing up? We
Yeah.
don't really see anything,
No.
and it's basically just the impression that they've had sex. Is that the
Yeah.
like? Is that what you're talking about? And I was like, well, he's that was what made me think, oh well, that's
Yes.
just homophobia then, because
It is, isn't it? I mean, like
in no universe is that a lot. It was nothing. It was
it's
barely there. I was
it's not
like,
gratuitous. It's not like, and you get these like two lesbian characters in the whole thing. It's like, okay, fine.
yeah, and
You know,
also it was relevant because that was the first
yes.
time we see Theo, and she's like putting her gloves back on, like back on and stuff.
Yeah.
So you're like, oh, okay, there's that's an odd thing to do in this
It-
scenario. Like, so I
right.
was like, well, what's he? What's his
What are
problem?
they
I was like, well,
talking about? Yeah.
the only
What are they?
problem there can be is prejudice.
The
There's no
truth of
other
the
way.
matter, what they betray is that any amount of queer characters is too much. Yeah. They
Yes, very
don't want us.
gratuitous.
We don't want it to exist at all. It's like when how from it does exist here as well, but in the States they misappropriate the word pornography. Yeah. So everything that includes a queer character of any kind is pornography. Doesn't matter what it is. It's kids book. It's
Really?
pornography. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Kids
Oh
book
God.
pornography. Yes. And
Do
it's like, what are you talking about? What are you
you
talking
ever
about?
think that people just need to like get a grip because
Yeah,
like
constantly, constantly.
uh
I do feel this is another thing that's really lovely about interacting with the horror community because again, we're kind of all like this. We're like a tribe of outcasts, aren't we? A lot of us
yeah.
feel like aliens in this culture or in our species. We feel like we must have been dropped here by accident, right? Our alien extra dimensional parents must have been on safari, right, and lost
hmm
us or something. Because sometimes I look at humanity and I think, yes, get a fucking grip. There's something wrong with you
Yeah.
all. There's something really, really. I used to turn it inwards when I was a younger man. I used to turn it inwards and think it must be me because it's so
Yeah.
prevalent. It must be something wrong with me. And that became like, a source of mental illness. But in latter years, I sort of started to realize, you know what? It's not. It's not. The
No.
way I'm a lot healthier than I ever gave myself credit for. and the species to which I belong and the culture to which I belong is sick in many profound and key ways. And one of those key ways is our relationship to sex and our bodies and the way it's. I mean, like, I've had this conversation so many times. I've had this conversation with Kit, but you know how it, any representation of like gay people or queer people, especially if they're like being intimate in any minor way, like holding hands or kissing or whatever, it's immediate grounds for like, you know, the conservative areas just to creak and to, oh, it's gratuitous, oh, it's awful. And yet they can't see how much straight sexuality there is in every aspect of our media because it's so normalized, right? So if you look at things
Yeah,
like, for example, chocolate adverts, there's chocolate adverts, there's so much sexuality in them. I remember when I was a kid, there
yeah,
were adverts for Cadbury's Flake, and they were always a woman in a bath eating a
yeah,
Cadbury's Flake, and the bath would overflow, and you get a close up of her eye dilating. So it's essentially shorthand for a woman orgasming, right?
yeah. And even more weirdly, the Cadbury's Caramel Bunny
Right. Yes. It's a joke, but you know what? That character is hypersexualized. He's
with her fluttery
hypersexualized.
come to bed
Yeah.
eyelashes
Her
fluttering away there.
hourglass figure and everything. It's like, yeah,
Yeah,
it's absolutely true. It's
it's
absolutely
so
true. Look at like superhero comics and cartoons, right? The costumes and designs of female characters are not only always hypersexualized, but they're often derived from BDSM imagery.
yes, leather
I mean,
cat suits
right.
and yeah,
But
yeah,
somehow, not only is that permissible in comics, but also in cartoons and children's media. What we don't, and don't get me wrong, I don't have a problem with this. I honestly don't. But it does demonstrate the hypocrisy, the lack of
yeah,
equanimity here. You know, our culture
yeah.
is essentially massively pornographic when it comes to portrayals of essentially sexualized women for the straight eye, for the straight male gaze. They just
I was
don't
just
see
gonna
it.
say, yeah, I haven't I know I've talked to you a little bit about this before, and I've never considered myself closeted, but
Uh-huh.
I'm bisexual and I'm in
Yes.
a marriage with a man,
Yeah.
so a lot of people don't know that. And it's only it's honestly is the rise this is gonna sound like so like la la la, but it is honestly like the rise of more representation in the fiction that I've been reading that has made me only recently, at the age of 38, feel comfortable with saying that to people.
Yeah.
So yeah, very briefly, when I was a teenager, I realized this about myself quite early on when I was about eight
Mhm.
or something. I had like
Yeah.
my first crush was on a girl, and I was like, oh, I don't really know what that means about me. So I felt a bit weird
Yeah.
about it as a child. But then when I got into my teen years, I thought, well, whatever, who cares? In this day and age, no one's going to care. And
Right.
so I wasn't like super shy about it, but I did notice the automatic response from boys was like, oh, this is for
Yes.
us.
Yeah.
Um, and and you just get put in this like there's already a lot of shame around this kind of stuff with girls and women anyway, but it
Hmm.
was very amplified when boys all of a sudden were like, oh, so what about that girl? And la, 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 la. Oh, can I join in? Like, all
Yeah.
this kind of shit. Um, and it made me feel a bit like, oh, okay. And then I told somebody and the reaction was not supportive. And then it made me feel ashamed and like it was a
Yes.
nuisance to tell people.
Hmm.
So I just kind of I did have a couple of relationships with women, but
Hmm.
I was carrying so much like fear about either being fetishized for it or
Hmm.
it just not accepted that I just never told anyone about these like secret relationships.
Yeah.
And then I kind of just thought, oh, I'll just it's easier for me socially to just have relationships with men because no one's going to say
Hmm.
anything. And the
Right.
result of that was I got sort of a chain of exes, men that treated me horribly. And do you remember like I put myself in this box where like I didn't know what
Hmm.
I was doing, and I have written a little bit. I wrote an article with like my top 10 horror childhood crushes and stuff. But when you write
Yes.
something and post it, it's different to saying it. So I made a video last month. I was like, it's Pride Month. It's a good time to do it. And I thought
Yeah.
I'm going to do my top 10 crushes, which involved uh, you know, boys and girls, men and women as I got older and whatever. And I found that when I started to record the video, I suddenly felt really uncomfortable. I was like, oh God, I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm outing myself now. But I was like, God,
Yeah.
it's time. It is time.
Absolutely.
And it's because I've recently read like 4 or 5 novels that had really great female bisexual characters, and
Right.
some written there's some written by an author that's a lesbian,
Mhm.
some written by a bisexual man. Um,
Right.
and I just found I was like, I wish I'd had this when I was a
Yes.
teenager.
Yes. That's it, right?
Um,
That is it. I mean, that just nails it right there, I think, You need,
yeah,
because we are so often, when you're queer, even now, I mean, like, there are people say, oh, queer people are everywhere in media now, blah, 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 blah. But it wasn't true when we were kids. It wasn't true when we were young. In fact, it was something that you just couldn't find in media, right? Right. I mean, really, right up until we were adults, really, it would have been the end of our teens when queerness became something that was popularly represented, or not even popularly, but at least started to become
yeah,
represented in like popular and mainstream media. So we didn't have those role models, we didn't have those experiences that our straight counterparts had. We didn't have the narratives that we could sort of refer to understand our own experience,
yeah.
And
And I always find it weird. Sorry, George, I
no, no,
interrupted
no,
you. Go
no,
on.
no, 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 no. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say something that made me really uncomfortable in the few sort of like female relationships I had was that if there were ever men present, unless
Yeah.
they were gay men, because
Hmm.
gay men don't tend to uh do this,
No.
obviously, but if there were ever like straight men around, all of a
Mhm.
sudden it was like they made me feel like all of a sudden I was performatively bisexual, like because they'd make
Yeah.
such a thing that that was like hot for them, and like
Yes.
straight men
It's
really they fetishize bisexual and gay women so much
oh yeah.
that and they make it do like they'll make the very nature of the relationship all that exists is the sexual component for them, and they think it's for
Yes.
them, and
Yeah.
they it's to the extent that they're like infringing on these relationships. But then
Yeah.
for some reason, queer people are called deviants. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
sorry. Well, I didn't insert myself into your relationship and then start
exactly.
making it all about whatever.
So much of that is
Yeah.
projection as well. That whole thing. I mean, you are right. There is this real problem with straight. I mean, I know it's almost sounds like carping, or it sounds judgmental, but there is a problem with straight male sexuality in that it's because of the way it is promoted within society, within our culture. It's very proprietary. You are right. It's about ownership. Yeah. So if
Yeah.
you're bisexual, that must mean that it's for them, right?
Yeah, or like it's a switch you can turn on and off depending on who's watching you. I
Yes,
I
right.
I
Yeah.
saw a clip of this stupid interview with Anna Paquin. I can't remember the interviewer's name now, but I don't
Mm,
like this guy. But
yeah.
she's married to a man, and he asked her
Yeah.
if he
Oh
said, "Oh, so
God.
you're a non-practicing
Oh,
bisexual?" And she was like,
Jesus. What
"Non-practicing?"
does
And
that mean?
she was like, "Well, you don't just stop being
Yeah.
something because you're in a relationship." She was
Right.
like, "Well, I'm monogamous if that's what you
Yeah.
mean."
You get. I
And
mean, like the
non-practicing.
non-practicing, fuck off, right? I mean, the worst of it is, I mean, there is the interesting thing about being bisexual as well is that you get the biphobia from both ends of the spectrum, right? So there's an
Yeah,
awful lot of biphobia. It's primary. It's almost exclusively in like gay men circles aimed at bisexual men. You know, there's this
yeah.
whole thing of like, oh, bisexual men don't exist. They're just afraid to be queer and blah 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 blah. No, they're
Oh,
bisexual. No,
yeah.
they're bisexual. Also, like if they're married to a woman, they're just gay men who have like accommodated or whatever, and it's like no, they're bisexual men who are married to a woman. It's not hard to figure out.
Yeah.
It's not difficult, you know.
I don't
This is
understand why
not
people can
difficult.
be so confused. Yeah, no, like
And
I'm
you
married
know
to a man, and I
Yeah.
I love him with all my heart. He is like, I'm so lucky to have him. And
Uh-huh.
there isn't like, it doesn't make me less bisexual, but it's not
No,
like it's not like I just went, oh, I guess a man then. You know,
no,
like, do you know what
it's
I mean?
just,
Like,
you know, every relationship is its own thing, isn't it? Nobody else really has the right to comment one way or the other about its dynamic. Yeah. I
yeah, it's
know, I know quite a few bisexual men who are married to women, and some of them are monogamous, and some of them are not. And
mhm.
so, with their wife's permission, it's not like an affair or anything. Some of them are, and it's true. Also, I know several bisexual women who are married to men, and again, sometimes it's monogamous, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it operates like this, sometimes it operates like that. They're their own things, their own phenomena. You know, that's what I
Yeah,
always find most amazing. Like, and it's something that you get. I mean, women have had this historically forever, regardless of what their sexuality or gender orientation or whatever is. Gay men get this all the time, gay women get this all the time, and bisexual people get this all the time. But this assumption that your experience is something for them to comment on, that they have any platform at all. And it's like my a lot of like queer activists make this mistake, I find, where they will engage within the parameters that our enemies prescribe. And it's like, no, they don't even have a platform. You just tell them to shut up. You
yeah.
just tell them to shut up. They don't know what they're talking about. They haven't met the minimum requirements for discourse. They don't know you. They don't know what your relationship is. They don't know what your dynamic is unless you choose to tell them, right?
Oh, also, they're not interested either.
Right.
They have an opinion and they look
Yes,
for things that confirm their opinion, and they will
exactly.
twist whatever they need to
Exactly
um
that. And even if they're met with like living evidence against their opinion, they'll ignore it. They'll just
oh God.
completely ignore it. So you are wasting your time. I mean, there was a time when I would argue until the cows came home with homophobes and all the rest of them and biphobes from the queer community. My God, have I had a go at them because I find them really repulsive. I'll be honest. It's like transphobes in the queer community. Insofar as I'm concerned, they're fucking traitors. They're fucking
I find
traitors.
I
You
find
know?
that crazy because
Yeah.
when I just think there's been some sort of like empathy failure, because if you're
Mm,
from a marginalized community, if you belong to a marginalized community,
right.
you understand what social stigma feels like.
Hmm.
And to not just social stigma, but you have fewer rights, and
Yeah.
you don't get treated the same if you go into a hospital, for example, or whatever.
Right.
And then you experience all of that, and then there's a whole other group of people that are experiencing that, but 10 times worse
Yeah.
because the rights are still so far behind.
Hmm.
Um, and then your opinion is, well, yeah,
Right.
like I find that like I find that crazy because like even as a woman, I feel like
Right.
just being a woman in society has it's developed my experiences just existing. I'm not
Right.
saying
Of
I've had it
course.
really rough, but I
No,
do deal with things
but
like I don't that I never would deal with if I was a guy.
right.
Um,
Of course. I mean, we,
and
we
that
live in inherently patriarchal, misogynistic societies. We do, in the same way we live in inherently homophobic societies because of our histories, because of the way our societies have been shaped by the unfortunate forces that came before we were even born. Yeah. So we
yeah,
do experience these things, whether people like to admit it or not. We do experience these things, and they do have an impact upon our development and the way we perceive the world, the way we operate in it. When it comes
yeah,
to like gay and like bi guys and women like harassing trans people or like not being able to see that the exact same arguments and forces are at play now as historically were brought to bear against us, and for exactly the same reasons, with exactly
yeah.
the same outcomes. I can't even begin to understand that. I think it is.
No,
I find that more repulsive than the sort of right wing, purportedly straight homophobes. Because at least, as much as I hate their guts, at least they're consistent. At least they're not pretending. At least they're not pretending.
there's that. Do you know what I love is when people go, "Oh, I don't understand it." Well, about
Right.
wherever they're
Well.
talking about, right? Well,
Right.
you could,
Well. Yeah,
because
and
there's information.
also,
You could understand this.
oh, you could understand it, and also,
Like,
but does it require your understanding? What again? It's this assumption of ownership, right? Because I don't understand it, it's wrong. Or it's like, well, if you don't understand it, just don't think about it. Go away, right?
yeah, like not understanding something isn't license to hate it.
I don't understand
Like,
lots of things. I don't understand why straight people have kids, but that's just I'm not gonna I am not going to rail against
I
those who do. You know.
do you know do you know what, George? I don't understand where all the gays get the glow sticks. But you
Yeah,
don't see me going. No, I'm just joking.
I know.
I was just thinking about
Well, that
the
comes
first
from
time
club
I
culture. Yeah,
I was gonna say
that comes from club culture.
the first time I ever went in a gay club, I was like,
Uh,
oh my God, I'm never
yeah,
going anywhere else ever again.
right, right.
It's not my type of music typically, I will
Hmm.
say, but I might have told you this before. Sorry, cut me off if I'm just
No,
repeating everything I've
no.
told you. I it was my friend's birthday, and there was
Uh-huh,
a big group of us, all women, and then one guy,
uh-huh,
and we're like, "Where do you want to go?" And she was like, "Oh, let's go to the local gay club." And I was like, "Oh, I've never been there before. Yeah, cool." So we were queuing up, and then the one guy that was with us was straight, and he was like,
uh-huh.
What's it going to be like in there?" And I was like, "I have no idea. I've never been in." And he was like, "Oh, I'm just picturing like." Gay guys in mesh tops waving glow sticks around. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, you need to get a grip, man. I was like, what a stereotype. And then we walked
Take
in
it
and the
this
place were
wasn't in the 1980s either, so like it
no,
might have
this,
moved on,
but this was like early 2000s. But the
Yeah.
hilarious thing was there was like a 90s club night happening there, right? Which we didn't know about prior. So when we walked in, there were indeed many
Brilliant.
men in mesh tops waving
Yeah.
glow sticks. And I was
So it
like,
would have been like the
this is the
rave
best.
kind of stuff, yeah?
Yeah, it was
Awesome.
like a themed night, so everyone was
Yeah.
like dressed accordingly and stuff. And
Brilliant.
I was like, I'm sure this isn't all the time. I was like, but also this is great. It would like the
Great, right?
atmosphere was so good, and
Yeah.
it was the first place ever that I went out, and um this woman came up and she was like, "Oh, can I buy you a drink?" And I was like, "Oh,
Ah,
I actually have a boyfriend." And she was like,
uh-huh.
"Oh, okay, have a nice night." And I was like,
That's
"Oh my
it,
God."
right? That's the
I was like, I
way
did.
it, you know.
I was
Yes.
like, usually the response is, "Oh, fuck you, you slag." And I was like,
Yeah, yeah.
"Oh my
Well, that,
God." And everyone was just so nice.
yeah, there is, I mean, there is, I will only go to gay clubs. I'll only, for, not for the obvious reasons because I'm gay, but because they are just different places.
No, they just the atmosphere is like honestly, anyone listening, right? If you have never been to a gay club,
Ah,
like they are so like it's just the atmosphere is so relaxed.
yeah.
And
There's just not the tension or the danger or the potential for violence in like a gay club.
yes, yeah, that's where it is. Like there's no there is a very I this is my experience. Oh, obviously this is years ago, but this is just my
Yeah,
personal experience. I felt a very distinct lack of bravado that was
yeah.
would then be fueled by alcohol and whatever. So like it was really fun. Everyone was having a great time. It was just like um yeah, the guy that was with us, he was like that was the best night ever.
Yep.
He was like I
Yeah,
had
brilliant.
he's like I had so many compliments,
I'll bet.
but nobody was weird when I said I was straight. And I was like, yeah,
Well, they won't be. You
like
know.
and he was like, I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't the best night ever. I was
Hmm.
like, well,
Yeah.
that was cool. And
Yeah.
yeah, there's a reason that a lot of straight women love going to gay clubs
Well,
if
it's
they just want to go
safer,
out
innit?
together. Yeah, yeah,
Safer,
yeah.
innit? That's what you don't. You're not really going to have to worry most of the time in a gay bar. Don't get me wrong. I mean, like everybody still has to be careful and whatnot. There's always the potential for something awful to happen, for there to be predatory people and whatnot. But it just
Yeah.
doesn't. I've never seen it. You know, I've
No,
never seen. I've never, and when I was at university, that was kind of when I sort of effloresced as a gay man, and I went to gay clubs a lot back then. I really
mhm,
did, and never once did I see any, not just anything, anything unpleasant, but no tension at all, like nothing,
mhm.
nothing. People would come and
Yeah.
talk, they'd come and chat to you, they'd sit around. Sometimes you move on to somewhere else, and it was just like that. There was this ease there. I always found.
Yeah. I was gonna say, this isn't a rant about straight men, by the way. Love them,
No,
and I'm just like it's just like on a night out, if we're talking like out
yeah,
with his alcohol, most men I find absolutely fine or nice,
yes,
but
yeah,
it's just that unfortunately there is a higher number of the not nice ones than we
mm,
would all like to acknowledge, and we don't know who they are. So
yes. And I
that's
mean,
yeah.
Kit and I discussed this recently when we did, that Netflix series about the kid who stabbed somebody,
Adolescence.
adolescence. Yeah,
Yeah.
we were talking about how there is this real cultural problem with regard to the narratives that are being applied to straight guys in this culture at the
Hmm.
moment. And it
Yeah.
derives from this vacuum of identity. One of the weird areas where, despite all of the historical pressures and problems that gay people and queer people in general have experienced because of the lack of place in society and the lack of narrative applied to us, which is a real problem, right? It's always been a real
Hmm.
problem for us. One of the areas where we actually have something ready made for us that straight people don't is that identity of being gay and queer. You know, it
Yeah.
gives us
Yeah.
something. It gives us almost like a ready-made community. It gives us a certain historical cachet that straight people don't necessarily have, particularly straight guys. And there's this weird vacuum in culture at the moment, I find, with regards to narratives that apply to particularly like underclass straight men, and they're
Yeah.
floundering there. It's like and into that vacuum is creeping these really toxic, negative, grifting narratives by people like Jordan Peterson and the manosphere assholes and into it you're getting
Yeah.
this paranoia about what being a man or being masculine means, to the point whereby I've seen threads written by straight guys on the internet where they are worrying, they're anxious about the weirdest things because they're worried that it's going to make them less masculine or it's going to make them less. I tell you something, guys, gay guys don't think about this. We just don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's somebody close to me actually described this feeling of like there's a complete lack of like a sort of rite of passage kind of thing into manhood, and that
Yeah.
seems to be, and I do understand that.
Mhm.
I think I understand what he meant because becoming a woman,
Mhm.
if you're a cis woman,
Yeah.
is there's a biological process. Certain things
Mhm.
happen, and they're quite a big deal. Like it's a thing is made of it, and it's
Yeah.
I don't know how right this is really, but it is often phrased as like, oh, you're welcome to womanhood. You're
Right.
an
You
adult
know what
woman,
it is?
and
Women talk about it. Women
yeah,
actually give advice and they will talk about it. Men don't. We have to learn all
yeah,
this shit. Like when we go through puberty, and this is true of all of us, and our generation in particular, because quite frankly, our dads were useless at this. They were just not good at this kind of thing where, talking to us and, explaining these things to us. Um, there is none of that. It's presented in this
yeah.
very clinical, cold sort of like sex ed way, which is insufficient because
Yeah.
it doesn't explain like the emotional realities of it.
And I
Um,
think maybe the discomfort with like discussing emotional
yes,
processes as well is like I think sometimes with the older generations they expect boys to grow into men just by knowing what that means by
yes, just by
osmosis or
magic.
something.
Yeah, by
Yeah, and
magic or something. And also, I
yeah,
mean, like
hard.
there is this real thing where I'm really sorry, but older generations suck. Like, older generations of men just suck. They do. They're so bad at presenting role models and like showing us what this is, what this experience is like, and talking to us about it. But certainly of our generation, those of us who were born in like the 80s and the 90s, we kind of had to just figure it out for ourselves. And some of us were goddamn lucky because we found writers or artists or works of fiction or whatever that we could we could sort of like latch onto, that gave us like context for these experiences. Some of us didn't. Some of us didn't, and some of us don't have that. And I don't know
Yeah,
where you go, you know.
I'm honestly not surprised that like this manosphere shit has taken off, because
I'm not
not
either.
every not everything all of these people say is complete garbage. Like, wait, if you get someone
Right.
talking about, like, say, work ethic, you've got a career goal,
Hmm.
and that's your in on that podcast, right?
Hmm.
And then they start slipping in this stuff. Well, women just
Yes.
want money, right? Um,
Right.
I see they go, well, everything they said so far makes sense, and I bettered my life
Yes.
by listening to their advice. So I understand it. I just think it's
Yeah.
such a shame. I'm going to call him Bill because I don't know if he would want to be
Mm.
identified for me retelling this story. But my friend
Yeah.
Bill has a lifelong friend
Hmm.
since they were little, and they've had a little parting of ways because
Right.
the friend uh started spouting all of this stuff
The sort of
recently.
Andrew Tate
Yeah,
manosphere garbage. Yeah.
apparently said he doesn't watch Andrew Tate, but then
Mm.
Bill quoted some things that he said to me. I was like, oh, that is Andrew
Mm.
Tate. Like,
That
that's
is
one of
Andrew
his
Tate.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of his things he's known for saying. So like, and Bill doesn't follow any of this, so he didn't
Mm.
know. But he said, oh, what was weird is that he was like, I could feel how angry he is at
Oh yeah.
women,
Oh
but
yeah.
this guy has a long-term partner and daughters, and so his
Right.
personal experience of women isn't even what he's talking about. Like,
Yeah.
and so Bill did try to tell him, like, well, that's not my personal experience. I don't think it's your personal experience.
Mm.
Like, you go engage a bit. Like, these people are selling stuff to you. Like,
That's
they're
right.
literally selling
Yeah.
stuff. They're making money. So like,
It's a grift.
and
You know.
I think this is like a problem in recent years as well, is just critical thinking skills, reading
Hmm.
comprehension, because if you don't get that young, it's I'm not calling people stupid, by the way. I can't stress that enough.
Mm.
Like, this is like a failure in the education system and
Oh
stuff.
yeah.
It's not like, it's
It's a
not down
failure
to
of culture,
personal.
right? It's a failure of culture.
Yeah, it's not down to like IQ or anything like that. It's just that if you don't learn how to critically think about any information that's presented to you and why it's
Right.
being presented to you and who's presenting it and wherever, then you're just more susceptible to falling into these things that seem reasonable at
Yeah.
first.
It's so
Um,
true. It's so true. If you don't learn to identify narrative when it's being aimed at you, then
yeah,
it's so easy to fall prey to it. Even when it's complete hokum and garbage, and when you are outside of that, the demographic that this manosphere stuff is being aimed at, it's so evidently what you said. It's a grift, right? People
yeah,
who are
it's
doing
so,
this,
yeah, yeah, and
they're
they,
so obviously grifters, you know, they're so obviously con merchants and frauds, and they use all the confidence tricks and rhetorical tricks that cult leaders use and whatnot. And it's about money and power, and they don't believe a word. They themselves don't believe a word of anything they spout. What they've done is exactly what you said earlier, Kayleigh. They've identified where there is a vacuum and where there is a problem, and instead of
Mhm.
presenting real solutions to it, they've actually manipulated it. They've seized upon it in a very parasitic way to fluff themselves up, to swell their own influence and power
Yeah,
and money and ugh.
they're preying on people that they see a vulnerability in, and it's
Exactly.
disgusting. And
And for
I
which,
do,
for whom they have contempt, by the way. I mean, if you could be
yeah.
a fly on the wall when someone like Jordan Peterson is talking to somebody in private, or Andrew Tate, for God's
But what do
sake.
you mean by private?
Yeah, yeah,
What do
yeah.
you mean by believe?
What do
I
you mean by
don't,
what?
God,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
what did,
You would hear them talking about the people who promote them and who open their wallets to them with the utmost contempt, because they know, they are aware of the grift. It's not, they are like conscious frauds. It's not like certain brands of fraud where the fraudster is bought into the ideology. You know, they are conscious, completely insidious frauds, and they don't care that they're pumping poison in culture. They don't care that they're warping the minds and perspectives of young men. They don't care that they're inciting violence against women and gay people and queer people. They don't care about that. For them, that's a bonus. They actually love the power. They love being able to exercise that kind of influence over people. But they can
Yeah,
drive
it's like,
people to that degree of extremity. For them, it's like it's a narcissistic tick. It makes them feel good, you know.
well, it's like Trump saying decades ago that if he was ever going to go into politics, he'd go in with the Republicans because people who vote Republican are easier to
Manipulate.
lie
Yeah.
to and manipulate.
Yeah, it's
And
true.
and then when this comes out that he said this, everyone's just like, la la la, no, he was
Yeah.
just joking.
Yeah. Absolutely. This is the
Like,
thing, right? It's the psychology of the cult. And it's very, very hard to undo. They have to have, you'll never argue them out of it. It doesn't work.
oh, the
It's just never going to work. You have to wait for them to have their Saul on the road to Damascus moment where the scales fall away and they see something happens in their personal lives. They have some sort of experience or whatever, and they see how dark it is and how bad and damaging it is. And some of them never do,
yeah,
of course. That's the really dark and dangerous thing. Some of them never do. And it just keeps going deeper and deeper and deeper. But it is so dangerous. And it's just what we've got as a result of that is like almost a generation of lost young men who, quite
yeah,
frankly, if they had better men in their waking lives, and this is a point that adolescence makes, you know, if they had better men in their waking lives, they had better role models, better fathers, grandfathers, uncles, what someone they could fucking look up to who was decent, who could model positive behavior and perspectives for them, then this
hmm
this kind of nonsense would never get any traction. I said to
well,
Kit during that conversation, if we operated in a halfway sane or healthy culture, people like Andrew Tate, even our children, would be able to identify them like that for what they are because they don't even try to hide it. They're not even very
no,
good
it's
at it.
do you know what's crazy? So, I I'll quickly explain the job, right? So, I used to work in a strip club, and my specific job was if men pay, oh, I say men, sometimes there'd be women in there too. If people paid for dances or whatever on
Yeah.
card, then I took the card payment, and that was my entire
Right.
job. Just stand there, like, hello, I'm here to just
Yeah.
take your money, thank you. And I um there was like a really big shift. I don't work there anymore, but so when I first started, like on and off for years, I was like in and out of that job. And when I first got there, the you wouldn't see 18-year-olds come in very often, like young men, because money. But
Right,
usually on
right.
student loan day, for example,
Uh-huh.
whenever we got the student loans, and like you'd see them, and they'd come in and they'd be so like enamored and bedazzled by the women, and
Yeah.
they'd look so happy to be there, and they
Mm.
were like kind of easy for the girls to make money from. And like, to be fair, like most of the girls wouldn't even take advantage of it. They'd just be like, oh, it costs this much, I'll take you
Uh-huh.
for it, spend £20, £40 or something, and then those guys would go, but they'd
Yeah.
look so delighted, like, oh, I just had the experience of my life. And they'd be really nice to the women, like those guys,
Yeah.
because they'd feel a bit intimidated, because these are women that are like, gliding around
Of course,
like they've
right.
been molded from perfection.
Yeah.
And then the last time I worked in one of these clubs, the culture shift in the 18-year-olds was insane. I could not
Really?
believe, yeah, because I spent
Oh,
some
that's
time
so
out of the
interesting.
business. Yeah, I spent some time out of the business, and then I just kind of went back for only a few months, really, just as like a favor to cover some that was off.
Yeah.
And the 18-year-olds that were coming in looked displeased at best, hostile at worst to be in there.
Wow.
They'd like sit there with like blank expressions, their arms folded. And this wasn't just like the odd one. This is all of this age group.
Wow.
Everyone in this age
Interesting.
group I saw, right? And then the girls used to go over to those guys and be like,
Uh-huh.
"Hi guys, do you want to go for a dance?" And like someone would just
Yeah.
get straight up, because they didn't even realize like they could sit there and keep them talking for a
Yeah,
bit if they
yeah.
wanted. They
Right,
just
right.
go. And then um so I noticed like these guys just like sending the girls away really dismissively, and I was like, this is odd. And
That's very
because
strange.
I wasn't a dancer, I was like, well, maybe they're worried about the pricing or something. So I thought maybe I'll be more approachable for them because I'm not a dancer. They'll just see me differently. So I went over to this group and I was like, oh, hi guys. I just noticed that you're not talking to any of the girls. And like, is there anything do you want me to go through the prices with you so you know what the options are or whatever? And they were like, yeah. So what does £20 get me? And they were just so like, boom, 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 like, tell me. And I was like, that's fine if they wanted the prices. But the attitude was very odd, like hostile, as I said. And they were asking questions like, okay, so if I pay 20 quid, is she going to like bend over? And like very specific things that they wanted to see, right? And I was like, right, okay, so this is not like a live porn show, guys. This is you're not going to see anything graphic, like, you know, just. But so I told them everything, and then they just, I don't know, it was very weird. And then they were like, the girls didn't even want their money. Like, we're talking about a night where there are no other customers and none of the girls want their money off these guys because they're insulting them. They're talking down to him. Oh, so what does your dad think of you doing this job then? Oh, you can't have a boyfriend. What kind of man would go out with a woman that degrades herself like this? And I'm like, you're the guys that are
you're here.
Like, what are you talking?
You're here.
Yeah.
Right? You came here of your own free will.
And and I'm not saying that was all alien stuff to hear in a place like that, but they would normally be the older men.
They'd be the older ones,
And they weren't as hostile about it. It was like, I mean, it was misogyny, but it was through a weird dad lens, if that makes sense. Like, oh, well, your family okay with you working here? It's like, it would be kind of like derogatory, but not so intentional and malicious. So these guys were just like, you're nothing special.
Contemptuous,
and then they'd give them the money, and then they would demand things like in the dance. They'd be like, "Oh, well, you're a crap dancer. I want to see it." And I was like, "This is manosphere shit." Because I don't know where all of these young men suddenly got this idea that they are automatically above everyone in here. And do you know what I mean? Like, and even the way they talk to the waitresses and everything. And I was like, "Holy crap! Like, this is you're naturally." Yeah, you're naturally going to get it a bit from the customer base of clubs like that. But never to that level of anger. Like, outright. It was bizarre. And I was like, and the girls were like, oh, yeah. I was like, what's happened to like the young guys then, girls? Is this all of them? And they were like, oh, yeah, like half of us don't even bother. They were saying, oh, the problem is they're all watching these podcasts now and whatever and forming their opinions about us based on, because obviously sex workers are the lowest of the low if you're in these kinds of spheres. And they're like, the other thing is because of just like the rise of fashion and makeup and that, they're like, we're not really anything special anymore. They like the girls in college with them look like us, so it's not like, so they very much view us as like they're high value men. And I
mean, that's hilarious as well, because the girls at college would not go near them, and nor would these girls, by the way. It's like it's really I mean, there is this objectification that has happened where like an abyss has been opened, hasn't it, between straight guys and women, right?
It is a fascinating place to sort of people watch because of like the volume of men as well and the age groups. So like I noticed,
I was thinking there is something to be done here. There's like a cultural study or series of studies to be done here, just because you're getting it in such a stark and extreme way there. The dynamic between women and men in an ostensibly highly sexualized atmosphere.
And transactional as well.
And transactional too. You could. That is really. It'd be so interesting to interview the guys and the women. The guys outside, before they go in. Ask them why they're going in. What is it they expect to happen? What is it that And then during, and then after, and then interview the women as well. That would be so interesting.
It's honestly fascinating because you've got like the attitudes of the guys, and obviously again not all talking all men here, but like there's a particular demographic typically the strip clubs. So all kinds of guys go in there, but typically the ones that come back that are repeat customers. So you get like the older guys; those are the only people that have any money to spend anymore. If we're talking like 55 plus, I'd say.
Yes.
And I generally find them fine. They're a bit old school sexist. They come out with
Yes.
stuff, but they're relatively inoffensive most of the time.
Yes, and
And
not
then
dangerous, right? There's this sense that they're not
no,
potentially
you
dangerous.
no, they've got some funny ideas about the roles of
Mm,
men and women and whatever, and most of them have wives, and you just
mhm.
think, well, whatever.
Whatever, right?
But whatever. And then you got like the sort of millennial age bracket, which I
Mm.
would personally say is the most respectful.
Yes, that's us. Hello.
Those those are the guys that tend to come in and they're like,
Yeah,
oh hi, and they
yeah.
don't come out with things like, well, what does your boyfriend think? They're just kind of like, oh yeah, thanks very much, that was
Well,
nice.
I suppose that makes sense because the millennials would be the ones that avoided the sort of influx or the influence of the manosphere hyper masculinity bollocks, right? We would have been
Yeah, it's like in the in
too
between
old, you
times.
know. Yeah,
Yeah, the in
when it
between times.
started to really like filter into online spaces, we would have been too old. So we've been able to see it for what it is for the most part, you know?
Yeah, it's a oh God, like I'd always come home with hilarious stories working there, just like always customer stuff, like never anything to do with the girls really.
Yeah,
Uh, because they're all actually very normal.
yeah, of course they are. They're doing a job, aren't
Well,
they? You know?
yeah, they like I think people have got to say dear about the dancers, and it's like if you
Right.
haven't been in a club and you don't know any dancers, I can just guarantee that your idea is wrong. Whatever you're
Yeah.
picturing is wrong. Um, but the shenanigans that go on just because of funny customer
Funny
interactions is
customers. Yeah, I can imagine it. And you would just get them naturally, wouldn't you? There would just be
oh
funny customer interactions in that kind of space, right?
every night there was something. And when I stopped working there, I was like, that is the one downside. I don't have crazy work stories to tell anyone anymore.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I love my job now. I work from home. I got regular people that I work for full
Uh-huh.
time, and I freelance. I do editing and stuff, and I love
Uh-huh.
all of this stuff. But it's not the stuff of dinner party
Right.
anecdotes, you know. They're
Right.
like, "Oh, how was work?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I proofread some stuff and wrote a
Oh,
blog post."
yes.
And
Although, I
I
mean, like, there's a lot of material there. I mean, I can see like, I mean, the potential for storytelling in that kind of setting
Yeah,
is just huge, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I have some stuff on the go that I'll
Yeah, I'll
talk about
bet.
at a later date. um, but yes, yeah, I don't know. It's
It's
my
very, I
one of
mean,
my
that
favorite things to talk about.
it has got like the wheels turning that has as a cross section of what is happening culturally between young men and women.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
is such a good setting to do it in because a
yeah.
lot of the
It's
masks come off there. There's a lot of like
yeah.
strange honesty going on there, and it's just fascinating. Like from a sociological perspective, someone must have done this. Someone or must be in the midst of doing this, right?
I would like
Surely.
to think so, but I think that the focus of study, any study that has been done, I think it's been on like, are these damaged women?
Right, yes, yeah, of
You know, like
course, right,
the
yeah.
focus is on the women, and
Which is ironic, isn't it? Because, like, I mean, really, the whole phenomena is very strange, isn't it? You've got guys who are paying for a sexualized show which is based on a promise that never is going to happen because it's not, it's
they don't
very
get
peculiar.
anything.
Yeah, it's
Like
very
they don't get
strange, isn't it? The whole
you.
phenomena. I mean, it's odd from a gay man's perspective, again, because things like like sexual relationship so readily present or so available,
Mhm.
so available
Yeah.
that you just wouldn't it just wouldn't be a thing, you know?
Do you know what was like one of the most fascinating times of ever working there was after all of the lockdowns in
Mm,
2020. Um, when it reopened and it was allowed to function as a business again, the council put
right.
really strict stipulation, obviously, because so when they opened at public spaces, it was like no groups larger than six.
Yeah, of
Everyone
course.
has to be sat at a social distance, masks and everything, right? So
Yeah.
we got called for this meeting, like, right, we're reopening the club. And we were
Uh-huh.
like, right. And they were like, the
Okay.
girls will not be allowed to dance or strip. And we were like,
Okay.
right, so we're just opening as a regular bar. They were like,
You're
no.
opening as a bar, yeah.
I was like, we're not opening as a regular bar. What is happening? And they're like,
Yeah,
what we're
what?
going to do is, and we all made fun of this. We all thought this is ridiculous, right? They said that what they were going to do is instead of selling dances or like VIP time, which is like bigger
Mm,
blocks of like an hour, and most of those guys wouldn't have a dance anyway, they just sit and chat or whatever, blah, blah, blah.
yeah, yeah.
But they said, what we're going to do is we're going to sell 20-minute dates inside the club, but the girls have
Okay.
still got to be sat a bit of a distance and everyone has to be wearing a mask and the girls have to be
Right.
clothed. The council have said we're not allowed to operate with any stripping, basically.
Okay.
And we were all like, well, how much are you charging for 20 minutes to
Yeah.
sit with a dancer at a social distance in a mask, fully clothed? £140,
No!
right? And we were like,
Wow!
you guys are absolutely insane. Why don't you just lower the price of the alcohol and just open as a bar? Right?
Yeah,
We thought this is insane. No one is going to pay
right.
this. We were at capacity every night from the first night we
No
opened.
way.
But never made so much money. I've never seen so much money move through that
That
place. Like
that is so that I mean that does demonstrate something, doesn't it? Which is there is this need for female
human
company.
connection. Yeah, and
Yeah.
human connection. And like a lot of people had been locked in their houses for
Yes.
best part of a year. And I guess people that maybe weren't in relationships or whatever, and like
Hmm.
you can't just, you're not on Tinder meeting people because you're not allowed. And it's like,
Right,
I
right.
don't know. I just found like, yeah, I thought, obviously, as the person that was taking the card payments, I thought,
Mhm.
I'm not going to see anyone all night. There's not a chance anyone is
That's
going to pay for
so
that. That's crazy. But they'd
fascinating
come
that is.
and they'd stay for hours, these guys. So they wouldn't just do
Wow.
like 1 20 minutes. They'd be like, oh, can I just do 1 hour at once? And I'm like,
Whoa.
yes, yeah,
280, whoa, in the pot.
yeah.
Whoa. Hell.
Um, and then when it all finally started going back to normal, the girls were like, oh man,
Yeah.
shit, we're gonna
Wow.
have to like I don't even remember what my moves were.
That is fascinating. That is. I mean, like,
It was.
what a
It
lot of
was.
these guys can't identify, and it becomes very clear when you watch them, the sort of manosphere, the guys who've bought into it, is what they actually want is connection. They
Yeah.
want some kind of connection, but they've never had it. They've never developed their communication skills. They've never had it modeled to them in a healthy way. They've never
Yeah.
they regard women as aliens, like these other creatures, and they've never seen modeled healthy relationships between men and women.
No, and
Um,
it was really lovely to see because the atmosphere was very different in there, as you can imagine,
mhm.
because because the girls, like, they were still dressed really nicely,
Yeah, yeah,
in like, these like nice little sparkly dresses and
of
stuff.
course, yeah.
They all still looked despite the face masks and the face shields
Mhm.
and everything that people were wearing, but the atmosphere was very different, and
Yeah.
as a result, a lot of people just like they were regulars. We had a few people that would just come in the same day every week and
Uh-huh.
spend this kind of money. And then because everyone was just like sitting and chatting, getting to know each other, like people were like genuinely making friends with the
Yes.
customers.
Right.
And we even had like this one customer. He was 18 actually. The first time he came in, like right after we reopened with all these restrictions.
Uh-huh.
Um, and his birthday was coming up, and
Wow.
he always paid for like he'd pay for him and his friend, and like they'd have the
Uh-huh.
same two girls sit with them and chat every time. So
Yeah.
it was like just became a thing. And they were like, oh, what's your favorite color? And he was like, oh, I like green. So they
Uh-huh.
went out and bought matching like green outfits to wear for when he came in on his birthday. They got him a cake. They
Sweet.
decorated a little like seating area for him with birthday balloons and stuff. And I was like, and I was like, oh, this is what happens like when the girls are treated like human people,
Yes, like human
because
beings. Yeah.
the niceness that you see from those women isn't fake. It's just that they're not going to date you. That's all.
Yeah.
Like this,
That's all
they're not being
right.
fake to you though. They're just, yeah. There's just a limit to,
Right.
if you run
Right.
out of money, they need to go to somebody
It's
else. And
it's the limit of the transaction ultimately. That's the nature of the
yeah.
beast there, right? That's the environment. That's the
But if
service
you
that you're engaging in.
But if you're somebody that actually treats them nicely with respect and they
Right.
actually like you, they'll do things like
That's
decorate a booth
yeah.
and buy you a birthday cake.
Well, they'll
Like
be
it's
decent to you, right? Yeah. It's funny
yeah,
how that
like this
happens,
is
isn't it? You treat people with decency and they give it back. It's funny how that happens, isn't it?
yeah. And it was the weirdest thing to see all of these lovely, healthy female like friendships developing
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
this environment. It was bizarre, but it was like I was so sad when it all went back to normal. I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. But yeah, it is
oh,
a very strange. It's a strange phenomenon to see from the outside. The way straight sort of maleness has been so co-opted and poisoned by
yeah,
these anxieties or ultimately neuroses of masculinity. Just put it down, guys. It doesn't matter. The fact I can't believe there are people who think about this. I cannot believe there are people who like it must torture you in your own head if you are constantly anxious about, oh, am I walking in a masculine way? Am I dressed properly? Does this make me queer or gay? It's like, you know what? Gay guys don't think about this generally. We
yeah,
just
and
don't, you know?
really, really secure straight men
No, of
don't give
course
a
they
shit
don't.
either. It's like,
Of course they
um,
don't.
it's yeah, like I've told you before, like my brother just on and off for years. Every now and then, someone's just assumed that he's gay just because
Yeah.
he's a little eccentric. He's
Yeah.
outgoing, and also he did. We worked as children's entertainers together for a bit, and there's
Right,
just a
right.
stereotype with
Yeah.
with stage entertainers, like,
Of course, right.
and he's just like, ah, I don't really like
Whatever, right?
yeah, if ever someone's like shown an interest in him, he's like, oh, tell him thanks. I don't really go for men, but I really
Right.
appreciate the compliment. Like he's
Yes.
like you know,
I've always known the straight guys I'm around who are really secure because they flirt like you wouldn't fucking believe with gay guys. They do. It's
oh, the
really
humor's
funny.
so much. Yeah, the humor is so much better when nobody's like
Honestly,
worried about
the
anything. It's
really secure straight guys are the biggest fucking flirts imaginable when they're around gay guys. It's hilarious. It's really, really fun. Um, you know, and that's how you know. Whereas the ones who are really, really insecure are the ones who are like worried and, anxious about it. And it's like, yeah, it's like, and also ironically, they're always the ones that you wouldn't touch with a barge pole, which is hilarious. It's like,
I do
yeah,
find,
you're not going to
yeah,
get jumped, all right? You know?
the the irony for the guys that are really concerned with how they're presenting their masculinity are the like is that the guys who don't give a shit about that are the
Right.
ones that find women easier, I think.
Yeah. Well,
Because
the big thing is they don't objectify women, right? They don't see women as enemies or aliens or as potential gets. It's
yeah,
they
and
just they
come
just they don't they don't have that distinction. They're just people, right?
yeah, and I as the kinds of men that I've been like attracted to that I thought, oh no, this is like this could this is relationship
Yeah.
kind of territory are the guys that aren't concerned with any of this
Right.
stuff, like, and they're like I went on a date, well, it was a first date, and on the way
Mm.
to the restaurant the guy said something about there was a gay couple on EastEnders for the first time ever or something like that, and he
Uh,
was like, oh, I've got nothing against gays, and I was like, oh,
here we go.
the
Yeah.
fact that you've just said that and
Here
also
we
just
go. Yeah.
said used gays as a collective
Yeah.
descriptor, and he's like, oh, I've got nothing against gays, but I
But
don't want to see
yeah.
it. I don't think it should be on TV. And I was like, God, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter if
That's
he's perfect for the rest of the date now. I'll
no.
never go out with him again because
New.
I I that's such a that's
Also,
such a
why
weird way
would
to
you?
out yourself
It
as
is
being so insecure.
such a weird thing to say on a first date with someone as well. Like in the first instance, it's such a weird, insecure, down thing to it's very negative. Why would you do
Yeah,
that? Why would you
I
like? I
I
mean,
guess he thought I'd agree for some reason,
yeah,
and I'm just sat
very
there with my
strange.
in my little bisexual head
Yeah,
going,
you're
oh,
right.
I feel, I mean, I'm not a man, but I am personally offended by what you just said.
Yeah,
Um, because that sort
Again,
of
they don't
that by
see it, do
extension
they?
applies to me. Yeah,
Right. They don't see it,
it's
do they? Like the amount of dysfunctional relationships in soap operas. The amount of
yeah.
dysfunctional relationships where people are having affairs, so people are having affairs with their own kin in some of them, some of them have dabbled in incest and whatnot. And it's like, yeah, it's funny,
It's
isn't it?
it's the moral different it's the moral platforms that you put on again, isn't it? I reread The Mist last year. I hadn't read it for a while. I love The Mist, and I just completely
First proper horror
forgot.
story I ever read.
Oh, it's so good. But I did
Yeah.
forget that in the book, because I've seen the film so many times and it's so
Yeah.
similar, I sort of like mash them together. But
Uh-huh.
I forgot that in the story he sleeps with the lady in the
Oh
supermarket,
yeah. Oh yeah.
and he doesn't know if his
Wife
wife
is dead or
is
not.
gone or like, and everyone's like, oh yeah, but and I'm not like mad at Stephen King for it, because I do
Mhm.
think he does generally speaking depict people as they would act.
As they are,
um
yeah.
but the amount of justifications I saw
Mhm.
see from fans about that, oh yeah, but it's highly stressed and it's just sort of like comfort and da da da, and I'm like, okay, but where was
Uh-huh.
that energy when we're talking about Laurie in the first two episodes of The Walking Dead then?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Because
Yeah.
she was told her husband was dead. It's a
Yeah.
zombie apocalypse. And I don't agree with all of her decisions later on. Don't get me wrong. I think she did villainize herself a little bit.
Uh-huh.
But everyone's like, "Oh, what a whore getting with her husband's friend." And I was like, "Well,
In the midst of an apocalypse where her husband is presumably
I was
dead,
like,
right?
but it was established that they'd
Yeah.
known each other for years. He's
Yeah.
a protective figure. He was a cop.
Right.
He already knows her kid. He's taken it upon himself to look after them. He told her that he saw her husband die,
Yes.
and
So,
the world as they knew it is over. Like, and I thought, well, that
right.
seems very natural to me that they'd
Absolutely.
just have a bot like, and then, but like, yeah, some guy in a supermarket a
Right.
couple of days into a weird mist sleeping with a woman he doesn't know
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
because he finds her hot. That is
Yes,
in
yeah.
there, but
Yeah.
I was like, oh, why? I'm not saying that it's right either way, but I do think that there was more sort of moral concessions you could make for
Yes.
Laurie in that instance, because she didn't think she was cheating.
It's exactly what you were saying. It's that eh, you know, that higher moral standard that certain demographics are held to,
Yeah.
particularly marginalized demographics. If you are the black character, or if you're this character, if you're the lesbian character, you are held to a higher moral standard in
Yeah,
most fiction.
you've got to be a complete moral, like A-star moral
Yeah,
person across the board
yeah.
for for people to allow you to exist in fiction.
That's
Like
why
if
I was so pleased to be published in the Book of Queer Saints when that came out, because that was a reaction to that very notion. You know,
oh
it's
yeah,
stories
yeah.
about stories about queer villains, queer
Hmm.
bad, bad, bad people, and it was fun to write that. It was just fun
Wasn't
to be in,
sorry, go on.
to be in. No, it was just fun to be involved. It was fun to be able to let loose and just, really get into the darkness of it.
As somebody that's in the queer community, George, how do you feel when straight authors tackle queer characters with good intentions,
Uh-huh.
but it's like because they haven't lived the perspective, it's not the depiction maybe isn't the most real
Yeah, and
because
and that does
like what
happen.
do
I
you
mean,
think?
well, I mean, I do really, first of all, I think that anybody can imagine what they want. It's not my place to tell people what to
Mhm.
imagine. Imagination is sacrosanct. People can imagine whatever they want. And I think if they are using their imagination to try and explore what the experience of gay and queer people is like, then that can only be a positive thing. There is a
Mhm.
corollary to that, which is that for the longest time, we have been excluded from these spaces and these expressions. And sometimes they need to step out of the way and let us tell the truth of our experience. But I find that
Yeah.
most most straight authors, cis authors, are willing to do that. They're willing to make that concession. And you can always tell when it's a straight or cis author writing a queer character. You can. They don't always get the nuance of the experience. And it doesn't, and the sad thing is it doesn't work the other way, because we are so saturated in heteronormative cisgender culture. We know all about it, because it's everywhere. Every nuance of those relationships are just
Yeah.
bombarded upon us. So, they're modeled for us, they're modeled for us in our families naturally. So it actually isn't an equivalence. We know more than they know about us and our relationships. It's a straight,
Yeah, that's
it's
true.
it's
Yeah.
complex. It is a complex thing, because I do understand the queer authors and artists who are like, we need the space to talk about our experience. I get that. On the other hand, I think that it can only, the fact that straight and cisgender writers and artists are making this effort can only enhance their empathy and their sense of what it is actually like. So it is an ambiguous area, actually. It's a complex area, I think.
Yeah. Because I read a lot of female characters that are written by
Mhm.
male writers,
Yes,
and
inevitably.
it is the nuances you say, because sometimes I read something and I'm like, oh, I don't know
Yeah.
if that would ring true. Like
Yeah.
if that perspective from that character actually rings true for most women, because we
Right.
view the world differently to most men.
Right.
We have different experiences, but um, I I'll forgive people for
Yeah.
things that they're just like kind of just wrong, like, as long as I know, like I it's not gonna like
No,
torch the book for me if
it's
if
not
I
gonna
know
bother
that.
me,
Yeah.
It's not gonna bother me
Yeah.
unless it's like brazenly homophobic or brazenly misogynist. And sometimes, this is, you have to bear in mind how long like King has been writing, right? He's been writing for literally decades, since the 1960s, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
accepted language, cultural mores have changed. And if you go back to a lot of his earlier work, he himself is not homophobic, but there was a homophobia ingrained in culture of the era.
Hmm.
And so if you read books like The Shining, for example, there's a buttload of homophobic language in that. And
I like that. I like that you said buttload.
yeah, right. And that is confirmed by the book, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
The
I
character,
never.
the hotel manager who fires
Yeah.
Jack Torrance, I can't remember his name, Ullman, I think his name is, or something like that. He is
Yeah.
described in really homophobic terms. And okay, it's from Jack Torrance's perspective, but the book
Hmm.
kind of confirms it, I think it does,
Yeah.
describing him as this mincing little queen.
Oh yeah, I
And
remember
I'm
that.
like,
See, this
interesting.
is this is why I have such difficulty if someone that's never read King before asks
Mhm.
me where they should start, because a
Yeah,
lot of the time people will be like, "Oh, just start at the beginning," and I'm like, I don't know actually if that's the
yeah,
best gateway point, because if you have been reading King since the
uh-huh.
beginning and you are of the culture,
Yeah,
the context is different, because you could reread something like that and go,
mhm.
oh yeah, like at the time that was
Yes,
an accepted term that everyone, so like context really does matter with
it
language.
does.
And
And
I whole
some writers can
yeah.
do it and some can't. I mean, like, King is amazing. I love King. I really do. He's written some of my
Yeah, me
favorite,
too.
most formative books. But I tell you what, he can't write queer characters. Can't.
I
He's so
I was
bad at it.
actually, when I
He's
asked
so
you that
bad.
question just now, I was twirling around on my chair and I just
Yeah.
set eyes on Elevation and I was like,
Yeah.
oh.
He's so bad at it. And
I
he has like acknowledged in quite a few interviews of late that maybe he should lay off writing queer characters, because he's just not very good at it. And
I think,
it is not a stab at
yeah.
King is like the godfather. He
No,
is the
I love him.
godfather of horror. He is, if I mean, like, we're of the age where, like, he was ubiquitous, right? In the 80s and the early 90s, if you turned around, King was there. King was everywhere.
Yeah.
King adaptations. He was even on like adverts for like Duracell and whatnot. It's crazy. And
Yeah,
it's so important to horror.
I
Um,
think that his catalogue of work is actually a
mhm,
really good example of like how like you can see it written down, like how culture has changed,
Yes.
like through his work, because
it's a bit like watching The Simpsons, isn't it?
yes, but like, and I really think that he's a good person,
Oh my
and
God, he's great.
I
He's a good guy. You know,
yeah,
he's
he's a
a
good guy, and
really
I
good right on guy. You know, who's had very difficult times and has published some questionable stuff sometimes, has written some questionable stuff sometimes, you know?
yeah, there's some weirdness in there, but
There's some, there's the infamous scene in It, which is never going to be in any of the adaptations.
no, and imagine the filmmaker that went, do you know what? We're doing the
Yeah,
whole book. If
no,
King could do it.
no,
um, but even that, like, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, there's nothing wrong with that scene, because of
no.
course there's something wrong with the
There's a
scene.
fair old bit wrong with that.
However, I honestly think I remember when I first read it, it was
Uh-huh.
like it was before all of the discourse on the internet about it,
Yeah,
before people that were new to him were picking it up and stuff, right?
yeah.
And I just remember when I read it, I thought, uh,
Mhm.
it's a bit uncomfortable. But
Yes.
my takeaway from it was that I really thought that that was part of I thought that that was part of Bev's arc, because, and
Yes.
I know everyone's got like these opinions that they just sort of like reduced her to whatever, but
Mhm.
I just felt like what he was trying to do with that was
Mhm.
that all of her fear that's manifested throughout the whole story is to do with her getting her period and how her dad's looking at her,
Yes.
and it she has a real fear of being sexualized by like the
Yes.
wrong people and everything.
Yeah.
And I really thought that that scene was supposed to be more like this was all about love
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like
Like
seizing control.
positive
I mean,
connection and whatnot. But yeah, yeah. I mean, it
yeah.
is. Don't get me wrong. It is problematic, and it will
Oh
never,
yeah. I'm
ever
not saying it
find
isn't,
its
but
way, into
yeah,
any adaptation. I hope.
I just don't think that he was sat there rubbing his hands together with
No.
glee though.
Oh
Like
my God,
like
no. No.
I really think he had like I think that what he was going for was like this sort
Mhm.
of like pure I mean he could have done it in any other way,
Yeah.
but like that's what I mean. Like I felt like it was tied into Bev's arc because she's like
Yeah.
chosen this and it hasn't just happened to her, which is what she
Right.
was afraid of. I mean it didn't have to be with all of them
No.
or any of them. But
No.
I mean, they could have all held hands.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but yeah, just sort of like, but yeah, context and stuff. But
But once
I
again, I
hesitate.
mean, like,
But
he's
also, it's fine if you
ultimately,
just think that seems gross. Also, that's
yeah,
completely valid as
yeah,
well.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
so,
yeah,
yeah.
totally, totally, totally. Um, but no, I think he's a very good guy. Actually, I think he's right on. I think ideologically, he's we very simpatico. That may be because
I
I've been
think
reading his fiction since I was like 8, 6.
yeah, and I've seen him change with the times, update
Yes.
the language he uses,
Hmm.
try and reflect like at like I just feel like he's not bigoted at all, and like
No,
that
no,
he
no,
makes
no.
I feel like he's made an effort as he's aged
Yeah,
to
totally. I
keep
mean,
up with
I
yeah,
say that he can't write queer characters, and he can't. He's not very good at it, but he knows he's
no.
not very good at it, and he tends not to these days.
Yeah, but he was making an effort to be more inclusive in his writing
Yeah,
because he heard the criticism that most of his characters are white straight men, and
well,
so I think he goes awry. Don't get me like I mean,
yeah.
Thinner isn't a great example of when he's dipped into,
No. It's not great.
but
It's
no,
not great.
but I think he'd admit that. And
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
sometimes, oh, I reread a story that I published a few years ago,
Uh,
for because it was going to be republished, and
yeah,
um, it was Bitey Backman. And when I wrote it, I was being really careful not
yeah.
to stereotype mental institutions.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I was trying to do this through the lens of the main character. So he's got a bit of an opinion about
Yeah.
this. And I thought this is okay because I'm not making a statement with this story and I'm
Hmm.
setting up that this guy's kind of a dick or
Yeah.
whatever. But then when I reread it to send to the new publisher, I was like, oh God.
Huh.
because there were just a few things in there in the language and stuff that I'd got wrong, and I went out of my way. Like I spoke to somebody that worked in one of these hospitals
Uh-huh.
and ran it by her, and at the time that I wrote it, that was the terminology and do you know what I mean? So like
Right.
I
Yeah.
so I was like, oh, hang on, I need to edit this because
Yeah.
I can see it and I don't even know why this is wrong, but I know.
Uh-huh.
Like I read a few sentences and I was like, oh
Yeah.
no.
It's just the nature of the beast, isn't it? Like if you do it for long enough,
Yeah,
you are always going to find stuff that's now culturally changed or is unacceptable or whatever. And I mean, King's been writing
yeah,
since the 60s, so it's he has, it's like you said, it's almost like a cross section. You can actually chart the evolutions and transformations and shifts of culture by reading King's work from beginning to end, right?
yeah.
He read it
I
in
think if you
chronological order.
Yeah, I think if you can go in there with like your thinking hat on from
Yeah,
beginning to end, and you can just bear in mind, right, this was in the 70s,
yeah.
and you've got some knowledge of culturally where we were. I think that you find
Hmm.
that like I wouldn't recommend like a 19-year-old to start with well Thinner then, for example,
No,
because that kind of they'd be like,
no.
oh well, I'm not reading this guy. What has
Yes,
he
you're
done with this
absolutely right.
Rainbird character? Jesus Christ! Like,
Yeah.
um,
Oh man. On the other hand, you've got like these, like even early in his career, these really powerful like feminist pieces, which were
yeah,
like just incendiary at the time. Sometimes literally. I mean, Firestarter is literally incendiary, but also like ideologically incendiary too. Things like
well,
Carrie and whatnot.
that's actually a criticism that he gets hit with all the time that I
Hmm.
disagree with. Is I hear people all the time say that he can't write women, and I
Oh,
disagree because I
yeah,
have, and everyone's opinion is valid. Like if you don't recognize
absolutely, yeah,
yourself in any female characters, I get why you think that, but
yeah, totally.
I find that he writes very strong female characters, and I appreciate
Hmm.
that. And but they're very complex, and they're like
Yeah,
burdened by whatever society's impressing on them, like, and parenthood and things like that.
yeah.
And I really have like related to a lot of his female characters, and I've been like happy to see the way they've been depicted and things. So I don't. Yeah, I'll never agree. There are criticisms that I do agree with and I see where
Uh,
people are coming from, but that one I'm like,
absolutely.
nah, come on,
Yeah,
guys.
I mean, I
Like,
always look at characters like Sarah from the Dead Zone, and
yeah,
she is such a full character. She's such an interesting, ambiguous character. She's got so much going on internally for a female character written by a straight white author of that period.
hmm
She's her own sexual entity, which was very rare at the time, very rare.
yeah,
She has concerns and thoughts about like her relationship that are very sincere.
hmm
It's not pure as the driven snow. She is a sexualized being, but on her own terms. Her own internal monologue is about what she wants from these relationships, which was pretty, like, at the time would have been quite, oh, there are not
yeah.
many there are not many horror texts that do this at the time.
No, I read, and I think as well that sometimes he has really captured a specific type of experience where you just might
Mhm.
not expect it. Like, I read Dolores Claiborne and
Oh
Gerald's
wow.
Game back to back,
Whoa.
and Dolores, I don't know if I meant to find her funny, but I did find her funny.
Mhm. He is funny. Yeah.
And then Gerald's Game, that open, like, what a great book, by the way. But
Gerald's Game. Yeah, that is a
so it's a cracker of a book. But like
whoa.
the opening where they're like role playing, and
Uh,
she's like, "Oh, stop, get off," and her husband is
mm,
like, she sees the shift where he's deciding whether to pretend he thinks that she's role playing
uh,
to actually live out his
yeah.
word fantasy. And I was like, that is
That's
unfortunately, that is quite that's fairly universal, not that exact situation,
uh,
but that fear of,
yeah.
oh God, I'm not in control here.
I
Um,
yeah.
that is very common for women, sadly. And I just thought,
Yeah.
Jesus, like he's really captured that. And then Rose Madder as well.
Yeah.
I thought that is a very specific kind of experience that
Mhm.
because for anyone who hasn't read that, that's about a woman in a really physically abusive relationship that
Mhm.
looks to get out. And the way that he described her thought process when she was like the day she decides to go, and like the
Mhm.
amount of fear that he's just going to come around the corner and stuff. And I was like, geez, like he has nailed that. Like he must have spoken to
Yeah.
people
Well,
to,
I think
because that,
when it comes to writing female characters, I do think he goes to Tammy, his wife, a lot of the time. She
yeah,
seems to be like the unspoken co-author a lot of the time, or at least editor of these books. I mean, she's the one who
yeah,
pulled
and I
Carrie from the trash, isn't she?
amazing. And
All
I
right.
feel like that's another thing I really like about his female characters is that I can feel his respect for his wife through how he
Yeah.
writes women,
It's
and
so clear
it's
whenever he writes
lovely.
directly about her that
Do you
he
know? Oh
adores
God,
her.
yeah. Something I find funny is like people are always like, "Oh God, Stephen King sex scenes. They're always so cheesy and corny." And I'm like, I just think he's been with her. He's been with his wife for
Uh-huh.
decades. That's probably what he's drawing on.
Yeah.
So like, if you think all of his scenes are a bit overly emotional, like I've
Yeah.
seen that, or
Mm.
they're a bit like romanticized. Like this doesn't always happen. I was like, well, I just feel like. I
Yeah,
just
I
feel like
mean,
we've got a glimpse of their lovely relationship
yeah.
out of
And also,
that,
I mean, he's been very open about this too. I mean, if you read a lot of his interviews and whatnot, he's spoken about how he's not really that comfortable writing sex scenes. It's just not it's not his milieu. It's not something and you can see that because a lot of the time he skips, you know? He doesn't
Yeah,
do
yeah.
full on. Sometimes he does, but it's very rare. He tends to
It's
move to
just
the
yeah,
aftermath. It's not
yeah.
Barker. He doesn't do what Barker does. Barker just goes full on. Um,
I I remember asking you before because I never saw what Clive Barker looked like. Um,
oh
and
wow.
I remember asking you, me, you, and Kit did a podcast about something, and I remember asking you like, is Clive Barker sexy? Because I just feel like from his
Yeah.
writing, I just feel like he's sexy.
Yes, he was. I mean, he's getting on a little bit now, and he has been very ill, so he's a little frail looking these days. But he was really, yeah, he was. He had this when he first hit the scene. He definitely had a fair few articles written about him where he was like described as the sort of like sexy guy next door of horror.
Oh yeah,
He had
I
that
could just
thing going on.
I feel like that kind of personality, like that's got to come from your personality as well. And I could
Hmm.
feel it through his writing. I was like,
Oh
oh,
yeah,
he's got like this energy, like
yeah.
that
Well,
I could
he's unashamed. That's the big thing. He's not he doesn't have any qualms about sex or
yeah.
sexuality at all. Whereas King is equally interesting because he does have hang-ups. And that makes the writing interesting. It gives it a certain layer and tension. Um, Barker is equally interesting because he doesn't, and it's unambiguous and it's florid and interesting.
Yeah, they're like sort of like opposite sides of the same coin
Very much
for
so.
like different styles and like
Uh-huh.
different subjects and ways of handling it, but
Yeah.
like such terrific they tell the truth so much about
They do,
people,
don't
I
they?
think.
I think that's it. I think that's a really good way of putting it. It's two perspectives on very similar truths, coming at it from like very different experiences and cultural spheres, but ultimately getting to something fundamental a lot of the time. And yeah, what I love
Yeah.
about them both is that often they don't express it clearly because it's not, they are smart enough to understand that the truth is often not clear. It's often not something
Yeah.
you can express really clearly. It's ambiguous and it's florid and it's shifting and they get to that. They really get to that. I love that stuff.
Do you know what's so funny is like the reaction I have when I'm reading either of them because like reading can teach you things about your own views on stuff.
My God,
Because
doesn't it?
for example, right, I'm fine talking about like sexual politics and things like that.
Uh-huh.
But if I'm reading a book and I hit a sex scene, I go
Uh-huh.
red
Oh,
immediately.
really?
And I always say, like, if I'm talking about books on my YouTube channel, I'll always be like, I'm an insane prude, so I didn't like this, but just bear in mind, like, seriously, guys, like, I go red when I'm talking about the book. I don't know what that is, but it's so fun. Oh God, Mark's book.
Oh wow, yeah, you gotta. That is yes.
So for the record, Triangle is
Yeah,
fantastic. I
yeah, yeah,
have to
yeah.
say, and to be fair, it does say on the cover
Well,
an
it is what
erotic
it is,
novel.
right? It's what it
It
is,
says
right?
it's an erotic novel, and I should have realized that, but I tend to not look at the cover or the synopsis before I read something. And Mark said, Mark was just asking for like, can anyone read this reviews, da da
Mhm.
da. And I said, yeah. I was like, throw it over to me. He was like, oh, it's not really horror. I was like, that's okay. I was like, because I want to support Mark and I wanted to read his book. I said, that's fine. And he was like, it's really gay. And I was like, well,
Yeah,
perfect. That's what I'm
it's
looking for.
really gay.
If he'd said it's really sexual, I might have
Uh,
been a bit more
ha, ha,
prepared.
ha.
But yeah, he did
I
say his book, and I started reading, and I was like, oh my
yeah,
goodness.
because it is an erotic novel, so it has like
It
very
is
frequent sex scenes, right?
very detailed, and I was just sat there like I turned into oh hi Loki. I didn't know if that was a cat or my husband opening the. I was like this is. I was stopped. I was like this is a weird conversation for another human person if they're only hearing one side of it. Um, yeah, but oh god, that book was good, and I
Yeah, I'm
really good.
enjoying it. I've got to say,
Oh, it's very Moorish. I found I couldn't put it down.
it is reminding me very much of some of the book that Billy Martin, aka Poppy the Bright,
Mm,
wrote at points in their career. It reminds me a little bit of the Liquor series, which is they are not horror books. Interestingly, they are about the two gay guys who meet when they're kids. They're friends, become
yeah.
romantically entangled when they're teenagers, and then go on to become chefs, and they own their own kitchen and whatnot. And it's kind
Mhm.
of like a kitchen sink drama, but with things happening and sex and the pressure of the kitchen and like fame, and it's really good. It's a really good series of books, but it really reminds me of those. You can sort of see the influence of those books in it.
I love it when you can see an author's influence in their work.
Oh, yeah, it's
Um,
so good, isn't it?
yeah, I can usually call it if I'm reading someone that likes King because a
Yeah.
lot of us grew up reading King and like there are Kingisms that just sort of slip into your subconscious.
Yes, and
Um,
I think, I mean, like if you are part of like our generation and you like horror,
yeah,
you're probably gonna without even knowing it, the influence of King is going to be upon you. You're just not going to realize it.
I'm always really jealous if I'm reading someone and I'm like, I bet they like Clive Barker because I always have
Yeah.
that thought because
Ha ha ha.
Clive Clive Barker can be like really gory and stuff,
Oh
but
yes,
it's really hard to just I find it hard to describe his style to someone who hasn't read him because
yes.
people were like describing his stuff to me for years before I picked any of his books up, and I was like, why did no one tell me that it
Hmm.
was this good? But people tried, but he's
He's another order of magnitude. Barker is. He writes like somebody off from an
unbelievable.
alien planet.
It's
He
it's
is
unbelievable.
unsurpassed.
No, he's a
The level of crap is
it's the
just
imagination. It's like
yeah.
the because every author has an imagination, but the
Yes.
stuff that Barker thinks up is so
Oh,
um
the shape of his imagination is completely different from everybody else's. Like in the
it's
world, he's a singularity. He's like a something happened. I don't know what happened to create him,
no
but
it's insane because like the stuff he comes up with is like wow
yeah.
that's and the number of times you'll think oh what a unique idea when you're reading a Barker story
Oh, it's
um
ridiculous, isn't it? It's like if you read one of
and
his
ha-
longer form novels, and it's like every other page, there's this crazy idea going off, you know?
Yeah, and like the way that he tackles everything that he writes about is so unique as
Hmm.
well. But at the same time, it's always got this really strong thread of like human truth through it.
Yeah,
So you still
yeah.
see you, and it's very disturbing sometimes if you see yourself in
Mm,
a Clive Barker story, but it's isn't
yes.
there? But no, he's that author that like. loads of people know for different reasons. Like
Yes.
my husband knows of Clive Barker because he knows about game stuff.
Oh, like
And so
Undying and
yeah,
oh, what was the
um
really
s-
bad one that he did? Jericho,
yeah.
which was not very
So
good.
but that's what I mean. Like we like so me and my husband are in completely different sort of entertainment
Uh,
spheres. Like I'm sort of like I like books and TV, and Nick is much more
uh,
like games and the occasional film, but we're
you've
not
got to
even
get him
really.
to play Undying for you because that's written by Barker, and it's like Barker does gothic horror.
Yeah, I
And
suppose
it's really
and
good.
I like when I reviewed a Hellraiser special edition of a
Uh,
magazine recently, and
uh,
I was just telling Nick about that, and I saying, oh, this is like a Clive Barker's, directorial debut and everything. And he
mhm,
was like, oh, he did the film, did he? And I was like, yeah, he wrote the story that it's based on,
mhm.
and then made the film too. And he was like,
Yep.
oh, I didn't know that he like did Hellraiser, and I was like, that's so funny to me because from
That
a
right.
bookish standpoint. I'm like, of course, like that's what he's known for.
That's
Like,
where most
but
people would know him from, the
yeah,
Hellraiser films, without a shadow of a doubt.
but it's really fun, like to talk to somebody that was like, oh no, I know him for this completely
Yeah,
obscure thing that I've never heard of.
yeah,
So,
it's very
um,
interesting, isn't it? Because like I knew him from Hellraiser, obviously, because they were like I was born in 1984. It came out in 85, so it was already in culture by the time I became sentient.
yeah,
Um, but I discovered his literature when I was like 11. And for some reason, I don't know why this is the case, but I didn't make the connection between the Clive Barker who did Hellraiser and the Clive Barker who wrote Weave World for the longest time. And
yeah,
I don't know why. I don't know why. Really weird, really strange. I just knew that I loved them both. And, I love both of those pieces of work. And that Weave World was like the book that, when you have that piece of work where all the lights go on,
yeah,
where something changes fundamentally in your consciousness, and it's like, bang, this has changed everything. I'm a different person having experienced this. That was that for me.
yeah. I'm trying to think of I think The Stand was that for me.
Wow, yeah, big book,
Um, big book,
significant book.
big book, and I was 12 when I read that, and
Yeah, wow.
I wasn't put off by like the size of the book because I didn't
Mhm.
have an eternal TBR then.
Yes, of course, right. Just more
But
time. Yeah.
I was so the concept that I guess that's probably the story that introduced me to the idea of the apocalypse,
Right.
and it's been my favorite subgenre of horror for my
Uh,
entire life, and I don't know what it like. I'd say that that was a life-changing story for me because it changed my outlook on
mhm.
storytelling and also the world. And
Yeah.
because obviously there is a very clear moral good evil divide in that
There's a
book.
politics in that book, isn't there? There's a real politics. There is in the
Yeah,
Dead Zone.
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.
King was
Um,
definitely exploring at that period. He was definitely exploring like his political perspectives through his fiction.
yeah. It was just and I don't know why I remember this so but I remember getting like outraged when I hit the part where they want to send Tom into Vegas. And I was like, no, something bad will happen to him.
Yeah.
He's too pure. You can't double agent him. Like he's too sincere. And I was so angry.
Yeah.
But like it was like a complex feeling because I was like, well, yeah,
Mm,
they're all trying to live here, and they
yeah.
like but like yeah, there's just so many complicated relationships and stuff.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the relationships in that book have got a bit like the interpersonal politics between the characters is
Yeah.
really complex. It's really all over the place.
Here's a question.
Mhm.
Did King partially develop the prototype for what would become the nice guy in Harold?
Well, I mean, we just think, to be honest, I think that guy has always existed. that
Yeah.
phenomena has always existed. We've just given it like a very specific label in the internet age, you know?
Yeah.
That yes, that person who is like superficially nice
Yeah.
or is performatively nice, but is actually underneath not an ethically good person.
Yeah, they think
Um,
they owed something for the niceness.
yes, yeah. So it's not
Yeah.
genuine. Yeah, absolutely. That has always existed, I think, and I think you'd probably find examples of that throughout fiction throughout the decades. You know, um, I'm pretty certain. I'm trying to think of like examples from like Dickens. You know,
Hmm.
I'm sure Dickens must have written characters like that. Um, they must be there. Um, because King, I mean, I think it may have been Kit, or it may have been Jack Graham, one of my other podcast friends, made the point about King when we did the Dead Zone recently. He made the point about King that he is our generation's Dickens. You know, he's this phenomenally successful, prolific, popular mainstream author who paints in
Hmm.
broad strokes but deals with very real ideas. And he in very short time, he's going to be spoken of like academically and culturally in the same way that Dickens is.
Yeah, I agree because his work
Oh
spans
wow, jeez.
several different periods of our um yeah, like of our social structures and stuff.
It's,
And
it's
like
strange. It's so peculiar. He'd seen and described through his fiction so much. You know,
mhm.
social transitions, cultural upheavals, political breakdowns, and it's crazy to think. It's
And
crazy to think what is encapsulated in his work.
I do think as well that unlike some of these other classic authors like that are celebrated, I do think that socially he's on the right side of history,
Oh my
which
God,
is
yeah,
reflected in his work as well. Because you know,
totally.
like when you're like, oh, these amazing influential cornerstones of the genre, H.P. Lovecraft,
Hmm.
flaming racist.
Oh my, wow.
But
I mean, Lovecraft was everything: racist,
yeah,
misogynist, homophobe,
yeah,
anti-Semite. You know, he was all and you know.
yeah. But that's unfortunately that's quite common. The further back you go, the
Yeah,
more common that's
sadly
going to
is.
be.
That Dickens
Um,
was a raving anti-Semite too, unfortunately. So, you know,
oh
what
Jesus
you gonna
Christ! But
do?
but I yeah, I do think that although some people are gonna like look at the language used in some of his books at face value as if those are his opinions and stuff and not
Yeah.
characters or what contextually at the time, blah blah blah. I do think that he's got a very good chance of like his legacy is going to be all of this work
Hmm.
reflecting society. You could learn a lot about people
Yeah.
through his stuff. And also, oh, don't feel weird about reading his stuff because he's not a bigot.
No, and I mean, like, he's so important. I mean, I think, like we said at the
Yeah.
top of this, he's so important, King is. I mean, people find it's difficult to explain, but before King came about, horror was it just wasn't a popular genre at all. It was relegated
It's
to like
wild.
it had collapsed in on itself before King published Carrie, and then, books like The Shining and whatnot, which became cultural phenomena, which were just read by everyone, and then the films, the adaptations. He, not single-handedly, but he is instrumental in resurrecting horror as a mainstream popular genre, and
Yeah,
for like creating that wave which swept up some of the greatest writers we know, people like Clive Barker, who wouldn't be around without King, just wouldn't have had the
yeah,
opportunity, certainly not the same opportunities were King not there providing that wave. Um,
yeah. I
it's
also think
unreal.
Ramsey Campbell is like a secret,
Yes.
like like a little hidden corner, well, not hidden in terms of his like own writing and everything,
Yeah.
but the stuff that he's done for other writers, and I don't
Well,
think that people
Campbell's
realize,
instrumental. I mean, like again, without Ramsey Campbell, no Barker.
yeah,
He was
yeah,
absolutely instrumental in fostering Barker's career. He did a talk at Barker's school when Barker was 12. you know.
Wow. Yeah,
So he's
I didn't know
seen,
that.
he's fostered Barker's like career almost from the inception.
And not only that, but when Barker started publishing,
Hmm.
Ramsey was championing him, and
The
to
stuff
have
he wrote is so lovely. If you read the old publications of the Books of Blood with Ramsay's
yeah,
forward,
yeah, yeah,
it's so, I mean, like, Ramsay's an old school author, you know, it could have been so, he could have so easily been more of a product of his time and his era, and he could have been like
no, he's
really like, he's so not, he is so affirming about every aspect of Barker's work, including the queerness of it,
yeah.
you know?
I don't think that people know how many times a word from Ramsey Campbell has really helped someone
Right.
go from like struggling author to,
Yeah.
oh, I've got a book deal now. Because obviously this is like their own talent and hard work and everything as
Yes.
well. But
Yes.
sometimes getting the right connections is about who
Oh,
you've
it's,
met. And
yeah.
I remember going to a book launch that Adam Neville did, and
Hmm.
somebody asked him how he got his agent, and he said he
Hmm.
was rejected for years, and then he met Ramsey at a convention, and Ramsey passed something along to someone.
Wow.
And I was
Wow.
like,
Yeah.
holy crap. Can you imagine if Adam Neville wasn't a full-time author? I
Yeah.
can't even imagine a world without Adam Neville. Like,
Right.
that's mad. That's crazy to me because he's so good. You'd
Yeah.
think in an ideal world, people could just get to success on their own merit, but that is
Yes.
unfortunately
That
not
is
how it works every
unfortunately,
time.
no, it's
Although it
not.
is his merit that made Ramsey feel happy to pass his stuff, obviously,
Yeah,
because Ramsey would have done
absolutely.
that if he didn't believe in him. But like,
No, of course
yeah,
not.
but he doesn't, Ramsey Campbell doesn't have to put his neck out for people.
No, he
And
doesn't, but he does. He does all the
and he's
time.
still
And people don't realize how important he is in British horror either. You know what he did? He liberated British horror. He
he's
made
amazing.
working class British horror a thing. Because really, I mean, they did exist, but before Ramsey Campbell, most British horror was very gothic and it was very much about
Yes.
aristocrats, you know, it was about
Yeah.
rich people.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
he was the
He
one who took those tropes and also the Lovecraftian stuff as well, because Lovecraft's a huge influence on Ramsey's work, and
yeah.
transplanted that into postmodern suburban British settings. You know,
hmm
made
there's an
working class Lovecraftian and Gothic horror. I mean, wow.
all of his scariest stories are like when he puts you in a small town for some reason. I'm like, oh shit,
Hmm.
what's he doing? And I'm always so excited, and I feel like there's like an era of horror literature that I always refer to. I don't know exactly what I mean by this, but
Uh-huh,
like the good old fashioned fun horror.
uh-huh, uh-huh.
Like it's the horror of the 80s where you'd get monsters and
Yeah.
like there were deeper themes and you can analyze them all
Uh,
day, but like on their
but there was
face
a
it's like
lot of
just a
there was a
good.
yeah, there was a big wave of the pulp, wasn't there? Then,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
the stuff that like Garth Marenghi satirizes, you know.
yeah, yeah. I yeah, no, I
Well,
love
lots of
Ramsey
those
and
paperbacks, lots of those
oh
paperbacks, I can
yeah.
tell you, you know, which are always about like they're about mutated rats or
Yeah,
worms or
just
stuff like that. You know, they're fun. And
yeah,
I've
they
got
felt
such a
yeah, like
soft spot for the pulp.
I love I know that we don't like this term, but I love elevated horror and I love psychological horror. I
Yeah,
love all of that, but sometimes I do just want to read giant rats
yeah.
or oh God, what's that slime? Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like
just
the pulpy stuff. Yeah, and there's no I
yeah,
mean, like we discussed when we talked about like the lack of distinction between like what's considered to be elevated and what's considered to be pulp. You know, um,
yeah,
but a lot of the
yeah,
time, the pulp, despite its aesthetics, is really smart and really culturally reflexive.
yeah, yeah. God,
And of
these
course,
are
it makes impact. You know, it's popular. It makes impact. So
Yeah, a lot because people. I think the mainstream horror stuff that becomes mainstream, I should say,
mm,
is the stuff that people just tend to find fun. More like
yeah,
this, like I don't personally like a lot of modern horror. I don't like jump
uh,
scare horror stuff,
no, I'm not
so
a
I'm
fan.
not a huge like the stuff that like Blumhouse. churns out, for example, I'm
Yeah.
not usually a fan, but
Uh-huh.
I do see the appeal for people that don't necessarily want a deep philosophical time,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
they just want to have some fun.
It's
Like,
not either or, is it? You can have both. It's up to whatever people want to consume
yeah,
ultimately,
like,
and it depends on mood. I find a lot of the time. Sometimes I want the pulp, I want the silly, I want the big and extravagant and bravura, and
oh,
sometimes I want
I'm
gothic, and sometimes I want Lovecraftian, and sometimes I want Barker.
Yeah, like if I want to reflect on humanity and stuff, like maybe I'll watch something by Oz Perkins.
Mhm.
Uh, but I also love Scream, and
Yeah, my God, yeah.
what a good time. Basically, anything with Matthew Lillard is a great time for
Oh,
me,
it's
though.
anything. Yes, I
He's
mean, yeah.
brilliant. He is brilliant. I just think he should be in everything.
I think I
Oh,
think a Matthew Lillard in everything would go down very well, quite frankly.
I don't know how true this is, but I did
Uh,
read this in like some official Walking Dead thing.
uh,
Apparently, he was the second choice for Negan.
really?
And
Wow.
although I do think that
How
Jeffrey Dean Morgan
interesting.
is perfect. I can't imagine someone else playing that now. I do think that they cast it perfectly. But I would
Yeah.
be very interested to see a Matthew Lillard Negan.
Yeah. I would like to see that.
Yeah, I'd love to. I wish
I
that they'd
would.
make a little alternative
Yeah.
world.
I don't
Yeah,
know
that'd be
how that
great.
would work, but I would like to see it. Definitely. Well,
Yeah.
Kayleigh, I mean, shall we? I tell you what, shall we? Because I've got to go in a little bit. Shall we? Would you like
Oh
to
my God.
cut this in two? And would you like to continue
Yes.
this? I'll upload this one on Saturday maybe, and we can pick it up again. But I know we wanted to talk more about King in depth, yeah?
Yeah, that was the original
It was
plan.
the original, but we got to chatting,
Piss.
didn't we? And then, and
We
it
did.
became a very interesting discussion actually. Shall we schedule? Well, I'll put this up one out on Saturday, and then we can schedule and have like the second part and talk about King in a bit more depth.
Yes, I would
What do
love
you think?
to. Yes, I would
Fabulous.
absolutely love to.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, thank you. First of all, thank you so much. This has been great fun. Before we go, anything you'd like to just pimp out there?
Oh, let me think. Just the usuals. The
Hmm.
last thing I published is still The End from Black Ship
Yep.
Books, a little apocalyptic micro horror
Which we
series. Um,
we
yes,
spoke
sorry.
about. There is a whole video somewhere roundabouts here where we chat about that in depth.
Yes. Yes, we did. I have a YouTube channel called Happy Goat Horror,
Hmm.
and we have just launched a gaming specific channel where all of our gaming content's going to go over there. So it's Happy Goat
Brilliant.
Gaming. It's been a
Oh,
bit
I'll have a
hard
look
to,
at that.
yeah, we've just uploaded all of our Silent Hill 2 videos so far there, and we're continuing it
Brilliant.
there. So it's a little hard to find, but I'll put links in my
Well,
usual
links,
places for
links,
that.
yeah. All of the links to everything, by the way, guys, below.
And if I may, I
Mhm.
would like to mention Horrorsmith Publishing has
Mhm.
just launched the first issue of a magazine which is free. It's ebook only at the moment, but if you go
Uh-huh.
to the website, and it's all full of like they've got like an interview with Owen King. I don't know how they
Uh-huh.
got Owen King for their first interview. I'm so jealous,
Wow.
but there's like there's a whole bunch of great horror stuff in there. So I would just like to tell people about that because I've been excited about that today.
Superb. Send me the link, and I'll put it down below so people can access it. Yeah.
Oh, can I do one more thing? Sorry, George.
Yes, please. No, 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 no. That's what this section is for. Go for it.
My unbelievably talented brother,
Mhm.
who is terrible at self-promotion,
Oh
is
God, yeah.
composing music. And he has a music composition channel. So if I could send you the link to that, if people would check
Yes.
that out, I'm trying, I don't know how I'm gonna do this, but I'm trying to get the internet to do its thing, hear his
Yeah.
genius, and somehow just get his music to the right people, and then he can have a long, successful career composing for games.
Excellent. So,
It's the
guys,
plan.
once again, go check it out. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Excellent.
Michael Edwards composer, yes. So
Okay.
I have to. I'm just proud big sister. I had to.
No problem. No problem. It's what we're for. It's what we're for. As for myself, guys, same as usual. You can find me knocking about here on Exaggerated Elegy, doing. I'm playing Doom at the moment. That's a lot of fun. Nothing deep there. It's the original Doom. It's shooting demons until they die. That's it. It's great fun. I'm enjoying it so much. So much. In terms of my published work, you can find links over at strangeplaygrounds.com, or if you go to the Evil Empire of Amazon, type in George Daniel Lee, you will find my Amazon author page that's got links to my short story collections and all of the anthologies and things I've been published in. Arrow Films, if you go to Arrow Films and you look at the Quartet of Torment, we've been talking about Clive Barker here, the Hellraiser UHD and Blu-ray collection. Myself and our mutual colleague Kip Power were on the Hellbound disc in the featurette Hell is What They Wanted, which is an hour and 48-minute chat about Hellraiser and Clive Barker and queerness in horror fiction. It's this, but you can see Kit and I, and we look great because it was shot by Jonathan Zarin, a mutual friend and a real filmmaker, and he's great. He made us look fantastic. We are now officially kind of affiliated with the Hellraiser franchise, which is really lovely, really, really cool. Woo! Yeah, very pleased. Over at Ginger Nuts of Horror, the ongoing series, which I inherited from Kit, the non-fiction series of articles, My Life in Horror, is ongoing. There's several articles to come out very, very soon from there about God knows, all sorts of things. Loads and loads of different things. And I think that's it for me. So, second part of this chat will occur at some point relatively soon, and we'll have a chat about King, and we'll go into a bit more depth. I even get Kit along for that, Kayleigh, if he's free.
Yeah. Oh, congratulations to Kit on his award nomination, by the way.
Yes. Ah, brilliant. It's a British Fantasy Award, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. For Millionaires Day. By the way, go and check out our Millionaires Day video. I'm really proud of that one because we played it to the hills. we are so good, Kit and I. We've discovered we've got a really good sort of like double act energy. We're very good at improv between us. We never realized. We thought, we were wondering like, should we plan this or what? But we just went in and started talking about it, and it kind of worked,
Yeah. Oh,
yes. So brilliant. I'll see if I can get, if he's not busy, I'll see if I can get him on board for that. It'd be good fun. So until next time, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.